It's the same old story. It's been a long day at the job, or maybe it's just starting to feel long, and you feel that urge to stretch your legs and get a little bit of a break. You walk down the street, or maybe you get behind the wheel of your car, and you feel the weight begin to lift. You walk through the doors, and the sound of the place starts to clear the air. You get a table, you order your drink, you listen to the sounds of the bar, and soak in the conversation. Welcome to the TNE Speakeasy, with your hosts, Isaac, Eric, Steve, Sean, and Caleb. Listen in as I discuss the 1977 film, Star Wars.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, those in between and unaffiliated, to Novice Elitist presents Star Wars. Welcome back, and here we are today. The Jedi Council has reassembled, and we're doing Star Wars 1977. Gentlemen, how are all of you doing currently?
Oh, I'm glad to be back in the old folks' home. Glad to be back.
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Obi-Wan, remember? Remember, that's what he called it.
Attack of the Clones.
Oh, I thought you meant us three with the old folks.
No. Just because I always thought it was funny that he called it that.
Do they have old folks' homes in Star Wars?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, we saw that Obi-Wan was just living in like a hut on Tatooine, so maybe not. But yeah, here we are. We're reassembled for some more Star Wars, and finally, after Sean's debacle of getting us to do the prequels first,
I'm sorry.
we're here for the good stuff.
That wasn't a debacle. That was fine.
But the problem is that we're talking about fucking Star Wars. I mean, what the fuck? What are we going to say about Star Wars that's different, that hasn't been said in media, 10 million times already?
This is what's been keeping me up at night for the past year.
Me too! Well, not the year, but yeah! I have no idea what I'm going to say about this. I mean, I think that some part of me is like sort of have a nostalgia boner about this. But when I watch it as a movie, all I can think about it is Sean in 2023 or 2022 or 2020. It doesn't replace the Sean that watched it in I think maybe 1979. Or something like that when it was re-released.
77?
Well, it came out in 77, but I remember seeing it when I was older than that. I must have been older than that. And I'm not talking about the re-release in the 90s. I'm talking about a re-release in Chicago that my mom took me to see. And I remember there was a fence in front of the screen to prevent people from climbing over. Yeah, I mean, what are you going to say about it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I definitely get that, and I watched it twice for this discussion, and yeah, both times I was like, I still don't really know what exactly it's going to come out to say about this during this discussion, but I guess the only way to figure it out is just by doing it, so.
No, I've had zero worries about this, and have also given it very little forethought.
Smart approach. I like that. To the checklist. So we'll start at the top. I know this will be difficult, gentlemen, but let's try. Well, obviously we're all giving our effort here, but just let's think of stuff. So, Sean, what are your initial thoughts on Star Wars released in 1977?
Well, I was 2 at the time, but I just explained it. My mom took me to it, and I enjoyed it. I knew who Luke Skywalker was. I collected the toys when I was a kid. Well, I didn't collect them. Now I collect shit. Back then, I was just gifted them for Easter, Christmas, birthday, whatever. It's probably the biggest movie growing up that affected me the most. I mean, if you talk to people that are a little bit younger than me, I think they would say things like The Never-Ending Story That's a movie, right? You know who I'm talking about, right?
I don't, and depending on what age you're talking about, I don't know if they'd say Neverending Story, but
But I'm talking about people a little bit younger than us. And well, wait.
Oh, see, I would say kids who came up in the '90s might, or very late '80s, might have more of a thing for Neverending Story.
Well, just getting back to the episode a little bit, I was going to ask Sean, did you have any recent, like on your recent viewing, do you feel like you discovered anything new, or is it one of those movies that you've seen so many times that it's just kind of, all the beats and it is what it is?
You're right. I know all the beats, and it is what it is. But you know what? I haven't watched this movie in like Blu-ray or 4K. Earlier today, I was watching Clue, and I was, looking at all these things that I didn't see before. And Clue isn't, of course, an action movie or a movie with a lot of special effects. But this movie, I've seen it I think I've seen it more than Clue. It's just like, yeah.
But did you watch the 4K version this time, Sean?
I'm watching it right now, and that's it. I didn't watch it for this. I mean, I know the fucking movie by heart, basically.
No. I understand. I was just curious if you saw, because I definitely noticed the difference.
Me too.
And but even if the difference is fabulous, like how much more would I like this movie seeing it in 4K? It's not going to go away. The movie is fine. So,
if I may ask, Sean, as I usually do, what is your best thing about this movie?
oh, see, this isn't right. I the first thing that I'm going to say is nostalgia. I saw this movie as a kid. I got all the toys growing up, and oh man, the best growing up now. I don't know if there's a best thing out of it. I think I like the fact that there is a good division between the protagonists and the antagonists. I mean, there's no question there. It's almost like an old Western, and I think that's on purpose. And as a kid, my favorite was always Luke Skywalker. That's not a gay thing. It's just because I thought he was really cool. Now, being older, I think it's Han Solo, because he's much more cooler than Luke Skywalker.
That's funny. Yeah, I agree with you. When I was growing up, Luke Skywalker, I always thought, oh, he's so cool. I couldn't understand why people liked Han Solo. But as an adult, it's exact opposite. Han Solo is the coolest, and not so much about Luke Skywalker anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in this movie. Yeah, I think Luke improves as the other two go on and becomes more cool. But yeah, here he's just like the wide-eyed, bushy-tailed kid. And that's just, that's more appealing for a child than adults, I think.
Yeah, I think so, because Luke is pretty much a child with childlike aspirations, where Han Solo is kind of a, more of an adultish. So I think children could relate to Luke Skywalker more, as opposed to adults probably for Han Solo.
So if that's your answer, Sean, then I will ask, what is your worst thing about this film?
See, there is no worst thing. I can't say a worst thing. I mean, part of me says, the fan part of me says C-3PO, but even he's cool in all this. I think, I don't know, the worst thing. There is none, actually, about this movie.
This is a flawless film, you're saying?
It's not a flawless film. I don't think so, because if you look at it as an action film, it actually it goes down. It does plateau as an action film, but it goes down at one scene, not at one scene, but at one point in the film. Once they're at the Death Star. If you want to look at it for a chart. It's a difficult question, Isaac. I don't know.
Again, I'm trying. I know it's difficult. We have to ask these these questions that really we can't answer, and that's why.
No, you're right.
People want to know.
The people are demanding.
Let's give the people what they want. I'll let you think on it.
Give the people air.
Sorry, it's okay. I'll let you think on it if you don't mind. I'll put a pin in it for now. I'll come back to you if you can think of a reasonable answer. We'll go on to Steve. Steve, if I may ask, what is what are your thoughts on Star Wars 1977?
Well, I think for the time it was just an amazing film. I mean, there was nothing like it in '77. I think sci-fi before that was the 2001: A Space Odyssey, Planet of the Apes, both great films. But I was 4 years old when the movie was released. So those movies, I was vaguely aware of Planet of the Apes, but I wouldn't have liked 2001: A Space Odyssey as a 4-year-old. But this, I mean, I think I ended up, if memory serves correctly, I think I ended up seeing this on its first theatrical run in '77. I think I saw it 8 times. But it's weird
wow.
because
Nice.
back then movies stayed in theaters for months. If they were a hot item like Star Wars was, I mean, it hung around for the year.
Yeah. Sometimes they'd be around for 12 months plus. Super popular movies.
Now it's like a week or two. if it's a good movie, it might be 3 or 4 weeks, but that's it. But I mean, it was at theaters for a long time, and like Sharon was mentioning, the toys. I mean, the toys kind of cemented its firm grasp on my soul.
Mm-hmm.
I had I tried to get all the action figures. Now at the time, my mother and stepfather were not the wealthiest people. We lived in an apartment, paycheck to paycheck, so they really couldn't afford to get me all the toys that I wanted of them all. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I only had a couple. I think my first figure, surprisingly, was Han Solo. Still have that one, by the way. Got rid of them all eventually down the line, but I kept my Han Solo, my Boba Fett, but I couldn't get them all. And so I remember just specifically targeting certain ones, like, oh, if I have Han, I have to have Chewie, I have to have R2, I have to have C3, So it was like I couldn't get the Death Star guy who did the gun, like I couldn't really had no interest in those.
They had them.
B-level. They had them, but I had like the Sand people didn't really care. Jawas, they sucked. But anyways, the movie was great. I mean, I can still, whenever I rewatch it, and it's that opening scene after the crawl, which as a 4-year-old, I remember not even being able to read the stupid crawl, but after the crawl, then you have the Death Star just blow over your head, chasing after the blockade runner.
Star Destroyer.
What did I say? Death Star. Anyways, that was just an amazing scene. I mean, it literally, it was like, it was quiet, and then all of a sudden, boom, this thing's just coming over your back, over your head, and on the screen. It was great. I mean, there's some great scenes. I enjoyed all the characters. It's funny. Back then, Princess Leia, played by the late Carrie Fisher. I mean, she was great. And I really, as a young boy, I didn't really care about girls at that time or their being heroines, but I thought she did a great job as carrying that role as a really confident character. I always kind of wanted to know what happened in the scene where Vader is interrogating her with what was the name of that droid?
Interrogation droid,
right? With the needle, the hypodermic needle. Like, that freaked me out as a kid. Like, what the fuck? I hated needles. I still hate needles. That may have given me the reason for my hatred of needles, but I don't know. It had so many great moments and great scenes. The only thing I would say that really bothers me today about the film is not that it aged poorly, which I don't. I think it still is great. I just hate what George Lucas did with the re-releases, the special editions.
Wait, okay. I'm gonna make. I know it's not my podcast, but I'm gonna say let's put a moratorium on talking about the George Lucas remakes until towards the end. Is that fair?
I agree with
Yeah,
that. Yep.
we can save that for now. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
So keep going,
All right.
Steve.
We all, I think, have the same opinion about it, and it would just be, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Unless it's your worst thing, then otherwise we'll save it for a little bit.
No, and I will say this. I feel like on rewatching, and maybe it's because I've seen the movie so many times. I mean, I don't even know how many times I've seen it now. But it does. There are some moments where it slows down a little for me, and I kind of zone out until the next exciting moment. Primarily once Luke, Han, and Leia escape the Death Star, I felt like there's kind of a moment where just kind of, I don't know if it's just the quiet before the storm where the assault on the Death Star, which to me, that moment when the X-wings fly in and they And there's that air-to-air or space-to-space battle with the ships. And that is, to me, my favorite moment of the whole film. I mean, the music, the John Williams score that ramps up during that whole scene, people getting picked off left and right. Oh, that was great. I mean, I think what the inspiration for Lucas was the battles of World War II with midway battles, with planes and stuff. So that was to me, that's my favorite part of the whole film.
Again, disregarding for now the special editions. Again, it's a separate topic. For
Unless
debate.
it's your worst thing.
What is if you can think of anything just from 1977 edition, even though there have been micro changes throughout the years before that, what is your worst thing about the film?
Like I said, there's some dips in the whole movie seems to be a nice action film, but there are moments where it kind of dips in slowness, and again, I just kind of check out in those scenes. That's really it. I mean, overall, it's a great film. Yeah, it's perfect.
All right, thank you, sir, for that. Now, Eric, your initial thoughts for Star Wars of 1977.
6 years ago.
Jesus Christ. God. I don't. You know what? I'll just go to sleep.
I've prepared
There you
4,000
go.
words. Honestly, I cannot remember the very first time I saw this particular movie in the original trilogy. It's possible it was the last I saw of the trilogy in my life. I'm not really sure. I'm pretty sure I never saw it at the theater until the re-release in 97. And the first time I saw it probably was on free television at some point, because really my earliest Star Wars memories mostly have to do with Empire Strikes Back.
How old were you?
At which thing?
How old were you when you were introduced to Star Wars?
It was, in my memory, it was probably 1980. Probably. That's probably where I got my first, because I have vague infant memories of being in the cinema for Empire, even though I was even young at that time. But yeah, those would be my first Star Wars memories. But New Hope specific, I couldn't even tell you. I could have been 7. I could have been 9. No, I couldn't have been 9.
Okay, well, you don't. Okay. Tell us what you thought, though. I mean, you already answered my question.
The funny thing with me in this movie in particular is that throughout my entire life, it has jumped around in where I would place it in terms of my favorite Star Wars movies. For the most part, when I was a kid, it was always my least favorite. Even though I liked it immensely, it was always my least favorite because out of the original trilogy, it always felt to me like it had the least going on. Also, this kind of happened with all the Star Wars movies. Even though I watched them many times as a kid, I didn't fully work out the plots exactly. So even though I had seen it many, many times, the whole story didn't start to make sense, like who the Empire was and what's the relation to the Emperor, blah, blah, blah. That stuff didn't start making sense to me until I was about 11 or 12, even though I had already seen all 3 of them many times before then. And then around the time of 97, this movie out of nowhere became my favorite for a little while just because it was the original and I liked the vintageness of it. But even to this day, I'm still reordering like where I fit this particular movie in, and I'm always having like a little bit different opinion about it. But yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you, sir. What is your best thing about this film?
And this is what I would say now in 2023. The best thing about this movie for me, especially with my recent rewatches, is definitely the way, especially the main protagonist, the ensemble cast, the way they play off of each other, and the most entertaining thing I find now when I rewatch it is just all the quips. I've known all these quips for decades, but for some reason they tickle me more now as if they're new to me, even though I've heard them all before. I find them funnier in my current advanced age.
What's about the quips? What is it about them exactly? Is it just like, oh, they're a lot funnier than you thought they were, or they're more original than you thought they were? Or they don't go for like the lowest common denominator?
when I used to see them when I was in middle school, high school, or college age, it was just like, oh yeah, I heard that. It's almost like hearing a joke for the thousandth time. Like, yeah, I already know he's gonna say that. I get it. It's not funny anymore. But for some reason, in my older years now, I just think that is so funny and goofy. As I almost feel, I feel like I'm in the body of someone hearing it for the first time, and I just miss quips like that, not just from like the newer Star Wars entries, but just in movies in general. I miss just. I know Disney has I mean Disney Marvel has corrupted that concept of quips, and made it sound like all their stupid quips of the last 10 years sound like they're AI generated. But I just love them all. Like, someone get this, walking carpet out of my way, and just almost all of them, like, they just make me like really giggle inside. And this is something that just happened to me in the last year or two.
Okay, what about how do they differ from what is it? How do they differ from quips nowadays? I don't know. Maybe not like AI generated.
Well, like I said, it's most noticeable in those Marvel movies when they first started doing it with Guardians of the Galaxy. I was like, oh, I mean, I didn't think this at the time, but in hindsight, I was thinking, oh, this reminds me of Star Wars and like that fast talking, yada yada yada. And I think it caught on, but then Marvel and many other things started doubling down on that, and they've just like ruined and trashed it. And so now it's usually obnoxious and annoying in modern films when they go down that road.
Yeah, it's obnoxious and annoying when Marvel uses it. It was good when Star Wars uses it, but it was way better earlier than that when Howard Hawks used it for like movies like His Guy Friday or The Thing.
Holy cat!
Indeed.
I'm gonna say that about the talking.
I've seen The Thing, but I need to watch the other one. Sean, what was the other one you named? The first one?
His Girl Friday.
Okay, I've never heard of that, and now I have to watch it.
Yeah, that's a old 19. I'm sorry, I've never seen it, but I think it's Howard Hawks, and
Yep.
there's a lot of banter back and forth. That banter is not new, but it would be new for a science fiction movie. I think that there had been I don't know how many science fiction shows before this movie came out, and those were popular. But there weren't many popular science fiction movies. That's important to mention. I mean, what the fuck were there? It was like, I don't know, Star Crash.
That's unintentional, I think.
Well, there was a lot, but there's Dark Star.
Yeah, that's a cult movie now, but yeah, it's important.
Not that Dark Star was popular, but
It's funny you mentioned that, Sean, because like prior to Spaceballs, it's difficult for me to think. I mean, and especially movies that are A-list. I can think of some B-list, C-list movies, but mainstream, it's very difficult for me to think of very many.
Barbarella.
Oh, Barbarella, maybe.
Well, yeah, but it doesn't have good quip.
Flash Gordon.
It has quotable lines like in a cult classic type of way. Barbarella does.
Yeah, and I think it was meant to be like a sexy space, somewhat comedy. So I think maybe just some of the jokes are so dated.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. There's no doubt
at this point that the 60s humor doesn't translate as well. But
oh no, I mean that is definitely what they're going for. But that's the thing; it's knowingly goofy.
Maybe 2001: A Space Odyssey. Of course, that's science fiction, but that's a completely different movie from this with different themes. They're both science fiction, but you're not. Yeah, it's apples to oranges as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but Eric, did you have a worse thing?
The worst thing, part of it has to do with special edition, which I guess we'll talk about later. But the low-hanging fruit for me, aside from that, is that for most of my pre-college life and even post-college life, I always hated, like when I would start playing the movie, like I had to get off Tatooine. So, especially in my high school and younger days, I would almost always skip past Tatooine and start the movie when they're getting to the Death Star. So for
Mm.
the first half of my life, the movie didn't really start till they got to the Death Star, and then I was in for the ride. I have different feelings now, obviously, but yeah.
All right. Thank you for that, Eric. We will continue more on that later. Caleb, your initial thoughts over Star Wars 1977.
Yeah, well, I guess if we're talking about our early origins with the film, I don't know how old I was when I saw this, but it's one of those things that has just always been there. You know, I've seen it countless times, probably, yeah, well over 100 times, especially as a kid. I watched it over and over then. But yeah, this one, like you said, Eric, this was never my favorite as a kid, and was probably my least favorite until the prequels came out, and those quickly, yeah, I bumped this one up. But, um, but even still, I always just loved the kind of simplicity of this story. Things start to get heavy and dark when we get to the Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. So I liked that this one just had a lighter kind of fantasy fare to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I guess skipping ahead right to my best thing, the thing that I always really appreciated about this movie was how well that they quickly pull you into this world and develop it so great. It's just a place that I always wanted to spend time in. And I always liked the Tatooine stuff. Less so now that we have the special editions where they just insert a whole bunch of dumb humor into that stuff. But whenever they went to Mos Eisley, I always loved that as a kid, getting this view of what the more seedier parts of the universe was. And yeah, no, just the overall aesthetic, I think, is just so strong here in this first one. Like Steve mentioned, the pacing is a little bit wonky, and I think that makes this one a little bit harder to go back to as an adult, just because, yeah, there's definitely a number of times where it just feels a little bit uneven, and yeah, lots of high peaks and then some long delays between we get to the next peak. And I always thought it was kind of an unusual quality, and I don't know if it's a strength or a weakness. Every time I watch it, I'm never sure, of them having the dual climaxes. Like, we get this great big up on the Death Star, and it feels like, oh, the movie could end right here. They have a little break, and then we come back for the real climax. I always thought that was a strange structure to Star Wars that they did that with it. But either way, I like both of them a lot. It's just, yeah, maybe that little break period in between feels a little bit strange.
So, Caleb, you're talking about where they escape the Death Star? That would be the ending, is what you would have preferred, or?
I don't know about preferred, but it feels like a climax. And then it's just like, oh, now we're into the aftermath. Like, is the movie about to end? And then we jump into another climax. It's like, whoa, didn't expect that.
That may be why I feel like the kind of the slowness, because I think maybe as a kid I was taking a breath, like, oh, that was amazing. And it's like, oh, it's not over? Then it slows down.
Yeah.
We're preparing for it, and then R2's got to load the map, and then Han's leaving with his reward, and then we get a little, more chatting in between. It's kind of like, oh, fuck, when's this thing going to end? Maybe, but
Yeah.
yeah. But maybe that's why I felt that way, is because we just went through an ending, and now we've got maybe the final ending was a little felt tacked on, even though it's a great scene.
I absolutely agree. As a kid, it's sad we're talking about this when we're kids. But I don't remember anything in between, like the starfights and stuff. But Caleb, you said your parts. Isaac, what do you think?
Yeah, sorry. Anything else to add, Caleb, or shall we continue?
Oh, yeah, just before Isaac goes, I forgot to mention my worst thing.
Yes. Caleb? What is your worst thing about this film?
Well, obviously, if we were talking about the special edition stuff, that would definitely be my worst thing. But my other worst thing, and this, I don't know if this will count, Isaac, I guess you can tell me if it doesn't.
Okay.
But my real worst thing, and one of the things that always bothers me when I come back to this, is how much this movie's been pervasive and parodied in pop culture.
Mm-hmm.
To the point that when I go back to it, I can't stop thinking about those parodies. Especially the Family Guy, Blue Harvest. I constantly have that in my head.
I had the same way.
Yes.
I had the same thing.
I agree.
And that bothers me.
I agree 100%. I don't like the Blue Harvest stuff.
I actually do.
I feel like with those kind of parodies, like the characters have lost some of their initial, I don't know what you would call
Respect.
it.
Impact or...
Which character?
Impact, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, specifically Darth Vader.
Mm.
I mean, Darth Vader shows up in everything, and I remember there was, not to get off onto a bunny trail here, but George Lucas, before he sold it to Disney, was going to do these cartoons.
Oh yeah,
I
Detours.
think based detours, and I was dreading that. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my god, they're going to make, or even though I love Robot Chicken, there's some really funny Star Wars, like where they just make Darth Vader an idiot, where he's flushing his cape down the toilet and he's having trouble, like he has roller skates like Inspector Gadget. I mean, I'm like, it just ruins Darth Vader for me. Like, I want him to be just a total evil son of a bitch that scares you. That was what he was back then. And now he's kind of like this person who's got a voice box, and he's, you know, he's more of a klutz, you know, stuff like that. I just, yeah. But that's revisionist.
What do you mean he's more of a klutz? He's not a klutz in this at all. He's a
no. I'm talking about like in the cartoons and stuff, that the parodies. They just
okay.
You know,
Yeah, it's like they've overused the image.
to a lesser extent, Rick Moranis, but yeah.
I will at least put the I don't want to say kibosh, but I will at least state here. Let's like try to. I know it's hard for us to separate that, like everything that's come after in the '77, but I would like to at least try to keep it to this film itself and not think of
Sure.
the legacy this has had in like a North American pop culture.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on that though, as opposed to the first three guys, to me, I just naturally have a separation. So,
I agree.
like the existence of one doesn't affect how I feel about Star Wars, the main stuff. As we're talking about Star Wars, I'm just talking about Star Wars. But yeah,
Well, I'll say anytime I watch the metal scene at the end of this, I just can't stop thinking of stupid Peter like looking off, because they're usually like the same lines or the same. It's the exact same scene. It just pissed me off. But if I'm gonna pick my worst thing from the film itself, then I'll say, it's just maybe some wonky pacing issues that, make it a little hard to sit through in one sitting, as opposed to when I was a kid. But yeah, Isaac, on to you. What are your initial thoughts for Star Wars? A Star Wars.
Initial thoughts. So to go on as per tradition with you guys, when did I first encounter this film? I think we mentioned this early on, like back in episode 1, but for this one of '77, I think it was in the late '90s when my dad showed me this on VHS. I think it was at then the new released '97 special edition, but I can't fully remember if it was or not. But either way, I was like 5 or 6ish, because I remember it. Yeah, I remember seeing in like the Lego sets, they had to start when Lego got the Star Wars license for toys or Lego sets. They had their initial line out there, and it was, I think, either before or after episode 1 came out with the tie-ins. But so I do remember that and being like, oh, I want these like so badly. But obviously I didn't have funds for myself back then, so it had to be before the year 2000. But anyway, my initial thoughts, wow. Throughout the years, when it comes to like special movies, or at least movies that hold a special place in my heart, at least I've decided to, I've stopped watching them frequently. I don't know why. I've stopped watching them. Maybe later on in my life I'll start watching them more frequently, but a little more infrequently, where it's like I have this with like the Miyazaki films, where it's just like or even Ghost of the Shell. I just can't find myself having the motivation, or at least the drive to watch something like this, because I want it to be like this special occasion. I hate saying that or whatnot, or treating this as something like very special, but like it felt like this film does like hold a place in my heart. But it's like, yeah, I can't just like keep watching it over and over again, and sometimes people can do that, and I just don't want it to become mundane in any sort of way. So come back to this, I don't think I had watched this properly, and this was intentional. I just had not watched this properly probably for maybe like 10 years or something like that. Or at least I'll say this, the original version, the non-special edition version, I don't think I had seen in quite a long time. Obviously, Caleb and I did a commentary over this back in 2019, so that's when we saw the special edition. But as for like the non-special edition, I don't remember when the last time it was I saw it. I could be like wrong. I don't remember, Caleb, if you can remember back. I don't know if when we were before Force Awakens came out, I may have watched. I think, yeah, I think I may have gone through. I don't know if it was a special edition or not, but I may have gone through the original trilogy. I don't know if I did the prequels or not, but I remember I think I may have gone through just to like lead right into episode 7. So no, wow, holy smokes, coming back to this, and not only that, I am grateful that we did our finally wanted to do Caleb. I'm so happy we did our initial George Lucas looked at his filmography, because man, coming back to this after watching Hidden Fortress, not his obviously, but an influence on this film, THX 1138B, the short and the film, and then American Graffiti. Holy smokes, it was like almost like a combination of both. Not fully, of course, but there was stuff of that. If I had to go, I'm gonna do, this is weird, but I'm gonna do my worst thing first. Some of the non-existent, but this isn't a worst thing, but I'll at least point this out quickly, is that wow, this film went fast. This was like a quick 2-hour watch, because as a kid I felt like, I'm not saying it went as slow as a snail, or as an imperial slugs, as Han Solo would say, but it wasn't as slow as molasses. But I was definitely like, wow, as a kid your perception of time alters when you're an adult, when I guess more
Yes.
the end is nigh or something like that, or when you realize that
Jeez Louise,
entropy and atrophy starts occurring, and it's like your time is valuable. So it's like this film went like a shotgun in a way almost. I was like, geez, is there any levity? And so that was where I like kind of wish that we had this in American Graffiti, where whether it was Lucas's dialogue or somebody else's, I wish some of those bits, I wish there was a little bit more character interactions with the cast. They have the quips, obviously, I get that, but I remember when we get into the Millennium Falcon cockpit, they escape the Death Star, they just fended off the TIE fighter attack. So it's like I was really hoping that when we Princess Leia goes in there and talks with Han, we get some character interactions, but I wish we had more of that. That would have really have been nice. So that's my worst thing. I guess another thing I had was, I think some of the darkness of the Empire, I don't think it's scary, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if it's as treated as scary as it should be, for the fact that we see Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru burnt alive, and later on we see them blow up an entire planet of people. It's like, I kind of wish that there was a little bit more weight to those scenes.
Well, you knew they were evil because they had those British accents. I mean,
yeah, it's true. No, it's interesting because there's nothing in this movie that really makes the Empire evil, other than the fact that they're the government. They're the stronghold.
Well, like Isaac mentioned, they blew up a whole planet just to test their new weapon.
Oh yeah,
and in a way of as interrogation. Just to prove a point to Princess Leia of all right, we're gonna use this as leverage. Like, dang man, that is cold. But even another thing, maybe this is another problem. One of my worst things is not the trench run. This time it made sense for me finally, as I guess a comprehensive adult. But the stormtroopers, I wish they shot straight or something like that. Just the whole because it's set up in the film that he says, or Obi-Wan says too precise for to that of a Imperial stormtrooper, and it's I kind of wish that there was no plot armor.
Isaac, you see, that's where the comedies affected your thoughts, or affected it when you saw it.
Okay,
because back then that wasn't a thing. The stormtroopers not aiming. That was, you could have.
Yeah, they were pretty good in this.
That's true, they were.
Yeah, but the joke of it came later.
That's true.
And so that's when people looking back, it's like,
Absolutely.
oh yeah, that's right. They couldn't do this or that, or when they were swinging across the chasm, they think it would have been an easy shot or something. But back then that wasn't a thing.
I guess there are a couple moments in here when Han runs into that room with 100 stormtroopers with the special edition. It's really all those 100 guys blasting and not one of them can hit him. But I think that's about it.
Definitely true. Thank you, Steve, for correcting me. That's fair. Thank you for catching my tongue there. Let's see.
How dare you?
Okay. So in there. I'll retract my statement over that, because you know what, they do seem pretty menacing in this. Also, I noticed the whole thing of T-16s being a recurring gag through this. I wonder if that was. No, never mind. I guess it was just a random speeder. But
T-16, what's that? Is that his?
Oh, it was because I think no, I don't know if it's Luke's speeder that he has, but I remember he mentioned maybe that was because when he sells the speeder, he says like, oh, there's it's not as much as like the T16s cost more or something like that.
Yeah, the latest model or something.
Yeah, something like that, the latest model. And the two stormtroopers that Obi-Wan, when Obi-Wan's turning off the tractor beam, they're talking about, say, you've seen the new T16s. It's like, oh, I never knew that. So I'm just like, oh, is that something else, or is it, like what's that about? Is that like a recurring gag? But I kind of like that, so it's not my best thing. But
It's the spaceship that Luke learned to fly on that we do not see in this movie, except for the model.
Yeah, it's the model. Okay, I figured it's the. Yeah, you remember Caleb, the model that he plays with when he's giving, or when C-3PO is getting an oil bath.
Oh, thank the maker for that oil bath too.
Yeah, and he's like like whizzing around with that thing. It's like, yeah, no, it makes sense.
Yeah, we see the real ship in the background in Attack of the Clones.
Which, by the way, that scene with those two stormtroopers talking like that felt like a real connection to THX 1138.
Oh yeah,
just with all the kind of background talk in that with those guys.
True. Very true.
Would you like some refreshment?
Could I have a couple more drinks there, please? Thank you. Fill her up. There you go. Don't be stingy. That's great.
But did you have a best thing, Isaac?
My best thing, I think, has to be some of the action scenes, or the interplanetary fight scene. Excuse me, with the fighters. That was especially the end trench scene, or the Death Star run. That was so fun. Oh my goodness! Like, and again, it was not to bring up THX 1138B, but that end scene with like him racing in that car, and then even at the end in what do you call it, in the other American Graffiti, where we have the race. It's just another evolution of what Lucas was doing there. So I really appreciate that, and I also appreciate the characters. And I don't know if it's natural or anything like that, but I love how somehow Lucas is able to like have all these characters have just a little bit, like just at least flesh them out just a tiny smidge in a movie where you would think that they would be forgettable. I don't know if it was him or obviously his writing team, but the producers like Eric Kurtz or something like that, but just whoever it was that helped them out with that. I really much appreciate that. So that is my best thing, sir. Now let's open the floodgates.
Can we talk about some of the older actors that like Peter Cushing and Alec Guinness? I mean, I didn't know who they were, and then you have a completely new cast of Mark Hamill, Ford, Carrie Fisher. I mean, it was just I don't know if having Alec Guinness and Cushing in there brought anybody in, but I really maybe appreciate those actors later as an adult.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because how many people that were in the original Star Wars film that hated their characters.
Oh.
Like Alec Guinness, notoriously, he would not sign if a little kid came up and said, Mr. Guinness, sign my poster, or my Obi-Wan figure. He wouldn't sign them, and he was known in interviews to say he didn't like it, and I think it makes sense why he was killed off. I think from what I remember, and this has been retracted later, but that Guinness convinced Lucas to kill him off. I think he was kind of embarrassed to be doing this kind of movie. I mean, it was going to be a sci-fi B schlock film, and of course Harrison Ford hates the character. He was begging to have the character killed off after Empire Strikes Back. I don't think he was expecting
his character or Obi-Wan's character.
No, Harrison Ford wanted Han Solo to be killed off after Empire.
Yeah, we'll talk about it, but they probably should have, considering how little they used that character in that third one. But
yeah, but Peter Cushing, I mean, what an exemplary actor. I mean, I didn't really have much thought of him as a kid. I just thought, oh, what an evil guy. But because of this, I looked into Guinness and Cushing's past films. And I mean, the whole like horror films, the Hammer horror films where he played Helsing, Van Helsing, and then even he played Doctor Who.
Yeah,
not the Doctor, but Doctor Who in the films from the '60s. which is a completely polar opposite character. How he portrayed that character to Grand Moff Tarkin.
Yeah, by the way, his if anyone's seen the Hammer Frankenstein movies, he's scary in those. He's just like an amoral, just asshole in those, but he's really good in that stuff as well. Yeah, great actor.
And I think that's why like Christopher Lee came into the prequels. I think because of what he saw what Peter Cushing did. I think he was excited to do a Star Wars film because of that.
Yeah, I always wondered if that was like a nod to his old friend. Like, oh, then we'll both be in the franchise.
There's a YouTube video where he's being interviewed and he's mentioned something like that.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, that's cool to hear. Yeah, no, I think they did it. I think Lucas was smart to bring in some established people, especially because he's going to have so many young faces here, so many inexperienced actors. Having them in the background just to boost them up, I think was smart.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that, Steve. In that, yeah, as a kid, I was a little bit like. I just treated Grand Moff Tarkin as this he's a bad dude and whatnot, and Obi-Wan's a hero. So it's kind of funny how the roles are reversed, where it's like Peter Cushing loved being Grand Moff Tarkin and was kind of not an old shame, but he's kind of sad that his character was killed off, because he would have loved to come back and continue on in this series. So that's a darn shame that he wanted to keep doing these, and then Alec Guinness is like, this is trash. I don't wish to further myself into this.
He was doing it for a paycheck. Yeah.
He was literally doing it for a paycheck. So nothing, fair enough. He at least got what he wanted. But yeah, no, it's I when looking at both of the when looking at both of these characters, I definitely can see the acting prowess there. I wonder, do you think? Not that I'm not getting this from anybody, but do you think that regardless of Alec Guinness's thoughts, does he still act professional, and does he still give his all, at least to treat this role professionally?
I think so. I mean, I think what he disliked was he was doing films like what was it, Over the River Kwai, The Lady Killers.
Yeah.
I mean, so he was known for some really great films back in the 70s, probably even the 60s, probably.
Yeah, 50s even.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at his IMDb. He was in Lawrence of Arabia. I mean, shit. I mean, he was doing all the big ones. And then he did this little tiny stupid film that nobody knew was going to be great. There was a
let's not forget that right before this, he did Murder by Death.
There you go. Absolutely.
Yes, as the butler.
And he was reading the script of this as he was doing it.
Did not know that.
And of course, Murder by Death is a favorite of us all.
That came out the year before. Yeah, 76.
Yes.
That's right. 76.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, I mean, no one thought the first Star Wars film was going to be that great. I was just watching an interview on YouTube where Lucas was saying that before the movie was released theatrically, he and Spielberg, I think, went to Hawaii, and they came up with the idea of Indiana Jones because they didn't think Lucas didn't want to be around with the release because he thought it was going to bomb. So no one was expecting this, and it's so funny because how many theaters were around in the 70s, late 70s? It could have been that many.
Eric.
And then
oh no, don't ask him.
Eric, how many theaters?
Oh no, he'll find the number.
But I mean, I bet you. How many do you think were showing the initial premiere of Star Wars? A couple hundred theaters, maybe, and then by the end, all of them were.
There is that, because it was initially supposed to, as far as, history's, like, again, hopefully the history is correct, because there's a lot of things where Lucas later controls the narrative of how this movie came to be. So at least going with the information that I know of, hopefully, to take a grain of salt this, but I hope it's at least the closest to accurate. It was supposed to come, this movie was supposed to initially come out in December of 1976. Wasn't ready, post-production probably. And so they were still going, and they were going to get it for May of 1977, May 25th, I believe, the Memorial Day weekend. And they had to do it quickly because hot off the presses was Smoking the Bandit. That was the film that was, I think, going to be re-released in July of, I think, for either 4th of July weekend or at least in the summer. They were going to do it in the summer instead. Like, we can't do that. Because I've watched Smoking the Bandit recently, or since, and it's like, okay, I can see why, the studio heads were spooked. Yeah, they were spooked because it actually is it's a fun time. But it's like, so that's where that came in. But as for theaters, I thought I knew this tidbit and piece of trivia, but I no longer remember that now. So at least a few theaters were probably showing it, but I don't have a exact number off the top of my head.
Yeah, and this is in the wake of Jaws, which kind of changed the way that movies were being released by studios.
Right.
Giving because before they would just kind of shop around different markets and kind of move it around. But after the success of Jaws and then pushing for the wider release, I think that this came under that same kind of structure. I think. Again, I'm not too sure either.
Who's the producer on this? Was it Alan Ladd who did this one? Is that right?
Eric?
Well, it's Gary Kurtz who was the producer, but I don't know if I didn't see if Alan Ladd Jr. was executive, but he was head of 20th Century Fox by that point, and was really, he was a big ally of Lucas's in this time. So I assume he probably did have, I didn't check if he was. I don't think if I saw his name anywhere in the credits. Maybe it's there. I didn't see it. But yeah, Eric, what are your thoughts on all that we're talking about?
I'm still working it out right now, but
Jesus Christ!
But
Oh, no.
well, yeah,
Thankfully, he muted this time.
Oh,
We couldn't hear the
God.
typing.
no. But what's interesting though, which I never knew until now, is that when on the day that it premiered, it was only shown in 32 theaters.
Mm.
And a week later, they only upped it by 11, so it was in 43 theaters for a while.
Oh, still the old school way. That's interesting.
Yeah, so I had no idea, but stay tuned for more.
Yeah, and didn't this, because I know Lucas for a while was working with American Zoetrope, the Francis Ford Coppola production company.
Yeah.
And American Graffiti made a big buck, but I know Coppola, because Lucas wanted to keep focusing on his smaller independent movies like he always talked about. And it was kind of Coppola who was pushing him like, why don't you try to make something that's more, mainstream, something that's going to actually make you some cash going forward.
Yeah, look at my Godfather films. Look how great those are. Why can't you
There
do
you
that?
go. And so this was his answer. This is my Godfather, Coppola.
Mhm.
I know that he didn't produce this one, so that's still interesting.
What did you guys think of? I mentioned earlier about Carrie Fisher being kind of a strong female. I would say a lead.
Definitely a standout.
I mean, as kids, do you remember because I don't think back in the day. I mean, this movie pretty much invented the whole action figure thing. I mean, before it was like dolls, like you had G.I. Joe and Barbie. But to put such a strong female character in a predominantly male or boy film, I thought that was great. I mean, I sometimes wonder if we would compare it to today, like how it would be looked upon. Like, would it be considered, oh, you're just woke and, all those tropes that you hear. But back then I thought, Carrie Fisher did an amazing job. I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on that? When you first saw it as a kid, what did you think? Oh, geez, another girl, or did you think, oh wow, she's really kind of a strong lead for this?
Go with Sean first. What are your thoughts on Steve's question?
I think he's absolutely right about a strong female character. She is the first strong female character that I know of in my lifetime.
I feel like Sean. I can't tell if I'm being gaslit right now.
Now keep going, Sean. Keep going.
No, that's all I have to say. That's all I have to say.
Okay.
Eric, your thoughts on Steve's question?
Oh no.
First of all, these were thoughts I never had in my mind with Star Wars or anything prior to like the age of 30 or something. I never even thought about this one way or the other. But for current day, I do have a fairly strong opinion because I know the Princess Leia character with Carrie Fisher and, of course, Ridley and Alien
Ripley.
are often cited as some of the... Oh, what did I say?
Ridley Scott. No.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Are often cited as some of the first prominent strong female characters, certainly in genre or sci-fi, but even across the board, they're often named that way. But from the numerous older classic films that me and Sean have run into, especially on the Best Picture and elsewhere, I find examples of really strong lead female characters throughout every era of film we've ever visited, going back to the earliest times of film, even in silent films. And I've seen it. So I think there's a collective amnesia out there with younger generations, Gen X included, that just don't know, because I hear this so often repeated on many review channels on YouTube and everywhere about those two firsts, but they have always existed. Um, and not just, oh, she's a strong lead, as part of this trio. I mean, like, lead of the movie. There are tons of examples. Now, are there more males over time? Yeah, of course there are. But there's a lot more than a handful of strong female leads that are significant and powerful, without even mentioning something like Wizard of Oz or Gone with the Wind. There's plenty of more examples that people are just unfamiliar with. So I understand in our modern collective mind, these are like the beginning of that, but I really don't think that the history of film reflects that if you really dig into it.
Well, I really liked one of the scenes was when they were rescuing Leia, or supposedly rescuing her, and she's like, "They sent you," or basically mocking Han and Luke about how screwed up this rescue plan they have, and I know she's like insulting Han left and right, and what does he say? No reward's worth this. So I always, maybe it's one of those funny moments for me too. It just made me laugh. That
I love it. I love that line.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like, oh, you couple of amateurs, like, really, this is who they sent to get me? Not realizing that they just came on their own.
Where's Obi-Wan? I mean, he would have, like, slaughtered everybody. Come on, what are you idiots doing here?
Not to mention the 1970s in general in film. There's a strong, and television of the time, there's a strong through line of women's lib. So it very much fits into the time period because tons of sitcoms, primetime dramas, movies in the 1970s specifically were all about that. So it totally made sense historically that it would be alongside everything else of the time.
Yeah, especially if you liked exploitation or horror. They were always pushing, like, the pistol packing mamas was just a staple of the 70s exploitation.
Yeah. So I think actually probably no one noticed it at the time. It's just retroactively.
I think people knew at the time, but yeah, that stuff was not remembered into the 80s and the 90s because, yeah, a lot of it was not re-released.
Yes, exactly. These are lesser known things in modern times.
Exactly. So I don't blame, modern audiences for not
it makes sense.
seeing it.
And I feel like the Star Wars film was very progressive. I mean, I think compared to today, it didn't hit, like back then. It didn't hit you over the head with certain thoughts and social issues. Like one of them that comes to mind, like I didn't pick up on until much later as an adult, was that the whole thing with droids being slaves. Like when they go into the cantina on Tatooine, they're like, "We don't serve them. Get them out of here." Kind of like, okay, what's the fucking deal with it? What does he have wrong with these droids or robots?
Yeah.
But now looking back, I'm like, oh, they're referencing like back in the South in the 60s, 50s and 60s, where there was specific restaurants, water fountains, and stuff like that for different people. I guess I could put it nicely.
Yeah, segregation.
Exactly. So it discusses that, but in a way that I think probably affected future generations to kind of, we're talking about these two Abbott Costello characters. There shouldn't be any reason to hate them. There was no explanation to why droids were hated so much, but it did kind of put a thought in my young mind that was wrong, and that even though again it's science fiction, we're talking about something completely fictional, but the concept itself was introduced, and I think credit Star Wars for that.
Yeah, and just even beginning with them is like the underclass, these kind of peasants trapped in this greater story.
Mm-hmm.
Then they get captured and like sold as slaves, if you want to put that attachment to them. I didn't pick up until my recent viewings how dismissive both Luke and I was gonna say Lars, prequels. His uncle, crap, I can't remember his name.
Uncle Owen.
Uncle Owen. how dismissive and they are to C-3PO. C-3PO is just like keeps talking. He's like, okay, shut up, I'll buy this one. They're just all mean to him.
Well, I mean, they're so unimportant that they're not even worth wasting laser
Yeah,
or
yeah, ammo on.
shooting them down in the escape pod. Like, oh, there's nothing in it. There's no reason to shoot down. And I think if there was somebody saying that if that guy hadn't given that order, if they would have shot that escape pod at the very beginning of the film that C-3PO and R2 were in, then there would have been no story, because the story would have ended after that. But their lives weren't even worth wasting fire. And I'm even thinking back. I'm sorry, I'm just going through the whole movie again. But the scene where they're on the Tatooine 4, is that the name of the blockade runner?
Tantive 4.
Tantive 4. There's a got the rebels and the stormtroopers shooting out in a hallway, and they're not even concerned about shooting the droids. They're trying to shoot around them so they can kill the rebels. Yeah. They're just no.
It's a funny little bit.
Yeah, I mean, either they're extremely lucky, but I always feel like they didn't want to waste killing probably valuable merchandise that they could reprogram, or just their lives weren't worth anything to them. So why waste? Their ammunition on it.
Yeah, and people always talk about the connection to the Hidden Fortress, which me, Eric, and Isaac recently talked about. I think kind of the only real strong connection, I mean, maybe Eric would make arguments, is the way they treat R2 and C-3PO. And I think the humor of these two characters that really have no business being wrapped up in this greater story, that just scrape by the skin of their teeth because people are just so disinterested in them. They just have that ability. Like you mentioned, them showing us the shot of the two guys being like, should we shoot down that escape pod? There's no life signs, just let it go. Like there's a sort of humor to that. And also them quickly trying to go through this action scene that would normally be exciting. You just see these two silly droids trying to walk through it, like, oh, don't mind us. A little bit of humor to that.
And they're kind of like the comic relief too. Yeah, the comic relief as well through the film.
Oh yeah, big time. Especially that early Tatooine section. Yeah, just C-3PO just being a big asshole to poor R2. Just constantly kicking him down.
So yeah, I got three things to chime in real quick.
Oh no.
I love how I have this new reputation.
It's not new.
It's not new. You've done it for years.
Yeah, decades new.
So, it's almost made me forget what I was going to say. Oh, so this whole idea of the otherism, or whatever you want to call it, with the droids in Star Wars, I think it's a large part the amalgam, just like many things in the original Star Wars. George Lucas is kind of playing off of two main things. One is the Hidden Fortress stuff, which, of course, a big part of that movie is the classism that existed in that era in Japan. And so it's just being translated over. Those guys were peasants or slaves in Hidden Fortress, and
Serfs.
That's who the droids are. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a combo of that with the concept that has been strong in science fiction forever, but especially highlighted in 2001, with the idea, is artificial intelligence or man-created beings, are they equal to or on the same level as regular humans? And so, by design, I think Lucas is very much playing off of both of those concepts with that. It took me a very long time and digging, and I finally found some numbers to work with on number of theaters in the 70s.
Very nice.
I'll tell you with an asterisk. So in 2022, there was, I guess, 39K screens in the US, and the best figure I found is for 75, with approximately 15K in the US. The only problem is with my 70s figure is they also showed the figures for the Soviet Union, and they have incredibly more screens in the Soviet Union. And I know Soviet Union is Russia plus other countries, but they're on a whole different scale, and they've been consistently massive throughout the decades. So that's why I'm not sure what I'm looking at, because while the US was down in 15K range, supposedly Soviet Union was 155K. That's all. I don't know. So I don't.
In Mother Russia, movie watches you.
So
There
I
you
don't
go.
know what's going on with these crazy Soviet statistics. I don't know why they would need, like, are
Well-
these 10 people theaters? Are they projected on the side of buildings? I don't know.
Well, and you got to consider too, like in the 70s, there were movie theaters that were single screen theater.
Yeah, almost predominantly.
Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. I mean, theaters today have what, a dozen at least.
At least.
Yeah, so
Yeah, the only ones that still exist are like the old vintage restored ones for the most
porn
part.
ones, yeah, the ones that show porn, yeah,
There you go. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's
with the sticky floors, yeah.
Me and Caleb have a single screen theater here, and I know another one on our island. So those exist.
Two here that I know of: the Park Theater and the Rio. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Oh, by the way, drive-ins were also counted in these stats.
Oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Also, still
Hmm.
single screen.
Yeah, those are almost gone.
Yeah. Oh, but I wanted to mention about the because I think we discussed during the prequels how some of their scrolls at the beginning kind of felt like they were just an obligation, and some of them were even confusing. And it was like, what the hell are they even saying in this scroll? I like that this one did such a great job of feeling like you just. I think, of course, this. I'm sure Lucas mentioned this many times, which is probably why it's in my head. But it's just like jumping into the middle chapter of a serial or something. It's just, oh, here we are catching you up on what's happened. And I think this one here is straight to the point and really serves that purpose well. And like you mentioned, jumping in on that chase and the great action scene, it really immediately pulls you in at the start.
Yeah, it gives you enough. Doesn't give you too much. Just gets simple. Like gives some exposition, and obviously there is exposition through the movie, but gives you enough exposition to be like, okay, it's not fully in medias res, but there was something that had happened prior, and that was another thing. You're absolutely right, Kale. Like I was thinking that when I rewatched this again today, where it's like, man, this feels like a very long, not very long, but definitely a serial from like the 30s or Flash Gordon, but yeah, modernized.
Oh yeah, it was definitely. Yeah, no, it was definitely. I think Lucas said it was inspired by Flash Gordon.
It was
the little 5-minute. I don't even know what you call them, vignettes or things that would play before the movies, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Instead of Bugs Bunny, you got Flash Gordon.
It's still weird to me that they literally show a short clip of Flash Gordon before THX.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
Because it's so hard for me to wrap my mind more around that connection, whereas the connection is much more obvious with this movie. So yeah,
Well, we broke it down in that. I don't know if you remember what we said, but
I don't remember all of what we said.
yeah, I'll save that for another time.
Sure.
But yeah, no, it's funny that you could see his influence even then, and maybe when he was trying to think of how can I make a more kind of commercial version of my sci-fi story, he just went to that Flash Gordon place. That's interesting.
Yeah, but it was a brilliant move, genius move, to start it the way this one starts with the scroll and then going into the story. I can think of countless examples after this where people have done their own version of that type of storytelling, and it's usually used to good effect. I'm gonna have to think what mainstream films used something like that prior to this, but I have nothing off the top of my head.
The Deadly Assassin, not a film, but prior to this.
I'm not counting television, but mainstream film. But I always thought it was super cool, and it always made me wonder. That was definitely something that I was preoccupied with as a youth, was wondering what the actual before story was. But I guess we all know now.
It's interesting. You guys were bringing up like past movies, like THX and American Graffiti. But I mean, this film, Star Wars, affected. I mean, besides the stupid comics, cartoons, and shit we were talking about earlier, but
Yeah.
But I mean, it affected films going forward. Like I remember being surprised when watching the original Bad News Bears. There was a scene where the kids are trying to use the Force to hit the ball. Like that's not even was that a Fox film? I don't remember. But I mean, you had that, and then I remember I think it was Albert Brooks's Defending Your Life, where he's in heaven. No, it wasn't Defending Your Life. There was another movie with Richard Gere. He was in heaven. I think he was going to be reincarnated, but he's talking to an angel, and on his on his table up in heaven, he had a lightsaber.
Oh wow!
And
wow!
and they're like, he's really surprised, and like the angel picks it up and is like, oh yeah, we inspired this or something like that.
You're right. I've only seen that once.
Huh.
It's been over 30 years, so my memory of that scene is very limited. I just remember him picking up a lightsaber, and because in heaven they have that technology, of course, right?
That's crazy.
In heaven, everything will be all right.
It was also one of those cracks, if I remember. I saw the movie like 2 years ago. It was one of those kind of jokes you see a lot more often now, where they're sort of making fun of like middle-aged men, like holding on to like their childhood nostalgia.
Mm-hmm.
Me? What did you say?
But
Oh no,
Steve, were you talking about the original Bad News Bears?
Yeah, the original one with
Because that's really confusing, because that movie came out in '76.
maybe it was the one after
Well,
that.
what? It's okay.
There's a scene where one of the kids goes up to bat, and he's trying to use the Force.
Oh, I wonder if it was the Bad News Bears in Breaking Training, which came out in '77.
Maybe.
Wow, this is so Star Wars related. I could.
Well, I never knew there was a '70s sequel to Bad News Bears. Now I'm curious about this movie.
from my memory, it's not good, but that's just my memory. It's been a very long time.
But the fact that it just affected films, going forward after that it was a cultural hit. I mean, icon. Yeah, sure.
Oh, it had such a huge influence that both the wave of fantasy films in the 80s and sci-fi films were
Oh yeah.
very much trying to follow in the archetype of
Like
this.
Kroll.
Even something like, oh yeah, definitely Kroll.
Back to Crawl. Let's go.
Oh really? I just talked about Kroll.
But even Alien
Yeah.
wouldn't have been made had it not been for the success of this.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
And the Star Trek movie would have been a lot different, or not even a movie,
Yeah.
and many other things. The list goes on forever.
Listen, I'm talking about Star Trek all the time.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention, because, like I said, I watched this twice before this, one in the original, not actually my VHS, I managed to find this old film print on archive.org. So I watched that. It was better than my VHS copy.
Really?
And then I watched the 4K version as well on Disney Plus, and man, this thing in Dolby Vision really did shock me how much because I'd never seen the 4K version, I'd only seen the Blu-ray, and it from that is a ginormous step up.
It really is, and it's mostly in the new grading, I think, is what makes the biggest difference.
Unfortunately, it makes the terrible inserted CGI look even worse than it did before, but everything else looks great.
Again, hold off on a second.
I would
Hang on there.
disagree. I think the way it looked in '97 was incredibly worse. The CGI.
I meant over the Blu-ray, yes. Of course, I mean the updated effects.
Oh, okay, that's different.
Yes.
Okay.
97 stuff is almost unwatchable.
Yeah, it really is when you look at it now.
Yeah, it's not even that. Like, just not to keep going with this, Steve, but yeah, you're correct with like the fact that this film took over the zeitgeist for a good long while, especially I guess cementing with the sequels. But we're just talking about '77. Not only like film, but don't forget television. I've seen the Muppet Show where they had like Mark Hamill and a bunch of Star Wars, like it was like all devoted to Star Wars.
Oh, that sounds cool. I got to check that one out. I haven't seen that one.
I got a question for Sean. Who's your favorite B character? So that would be like Chewie, R2D2, C3PO, or R5D4.
Yeah, I'd like to order 2 more glasses of wine. The old vino, please. Vino. Rojo.
Oh,
White
no.
Zinfandel. That's what my grandma used to drink, white Zinfandel out of a fucking box. Sean, I know you like wine. I've got a whole box of white Zinfandel in there for you. It's like, no, I don't think you understand. They'll make wine! They don't make good mouthwash! That's my Donald Pleasance imitation from Columbo, playing the wine guy.
There you go. And the old port in a storm.
Yeah.
My favorite's the guy that looks like he has like a penis mouth. You know, the guy who's following them around
It's a
and
penis
Mos
mouth.
Eisley. Looks like he has a giant.
This might be my new character. What are you talking about?
He's the guy he speaks into like a little thing. He's like, wah, 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 wah. Yeah, he's like Howard the Duck.
Oh, the spy that.
yeah, penis guy.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I always told my classmates that it was Gonzo, like in disguise.
Yes, I like that. It's Gonzo.
I always thought it's Howard the Duck in disguise.
And I love Caleb's how he impersonated the character because it sounded just like him. I mean, I didn't know who you were talking about until you did the voice.
But besides me calling him Gonzo, I always thought he looked specifically like an uncircumcised penis nose.
Agreed. I always thought that.
Oh my God,
Wow.
Eric.
I started it. I apologize. I started.
Caleb, I got a question for you. What about the scene where Obi-Wan's fighting Vader at the end, and then he relinquishes his life to save Luke?
I mostly like the dramatic weight of that. I do think that poor Alec Guinness, maybe that was the scene where he realized that, what movie am I in at this point? When he does a little spin. I always thought his face after he does a little spin, he just looks like, oh.
I always hated the continuity. If we can move on to the re-releases, the special editions.
Sure.
All the shit that Lucas added, which I hated. I hate almost everything he's done adding to the film. But the one thing I felt like he should have done was update that battle, because it does not make sense at all with any of the films. Even at that time, even in 97.
Wait, which battle are you speaking of specifically?
When Vader and Obi-Wan had the lightsaber duel.
Okay, and what was the thing that?
Because it's so
like the effects wise, you mean?
Slow. No, yeah, the effects wise, they could have improved lightsabers a little bit more, but it's so slow. Like, we know Vader can do better, and there was somebody who did a fan. Not like a year or two ago on YouTube released.
I think I've seen
and
this.
They're more like action. They're more jumping around, and I mean, not ridiculous like Yoda was in the prequels, but
yeah.
But it wasn't just like two guys like just holding up a toilet paper tube of cardboard and like just randomly aiming at each other's sword, which it just does not fit at all. And I always thought, because Lucas said, oh, well, of course it's slow. When the prequels came out, he said something along the lines like, oh, yeah, well, it's slow in A New Hope because, you've got a guy who's a robot and Obi-Wan is old. But as we get into it later, like with the animated stuff, that's just not the case. I almost felt like they could have explained it a little bit better in... was it Rogue Squadron?
Rogue One?
Where they could have said, Vader received new parts for his limbs. And so he's adjusting. There's a point where he's got to adjust to his upgrades or whatever. Like they never included that because to me, the whole lightsaber battle at that end, it just sticks out like a sore thumb. Like it doesn't make sense. Because in the very next film, we see him battling Luke, and he's way more active. Vader is.
Yeah, and I guess it's even more jarring with Rogue One before it because we see his little fight scene where he's trying to get the plans.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it would have been far more. They could have explained it so easily. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up just because actually I forgot I was going to mention this as like my least favorite thing in the movie now. Yeah, when I watch it with my modern eyes, the entire film, that's the only one moment that I get a little cringe for modern people seeing it for the first time is just that duel. And actually the effect of the saber was much worse in the original non-specialized version.
Definitely.
But I've heard the retcon and this and that, and definitely if you were going to do a special edition, it would have been nice to update it, like those fan edits. That would have been nice. Or even if you don't go that direction with an edit or something, I wouldn't mind if they were less animated and still moving slow.
But explain it.
If it was filmed in a way, if it was filmed and presented in a way that it was understood that they weren't about the physical duel at that point, it was more about the mental duel. And I don't know how exactly you convey that, but I'm sure there's a way you could have done it where it was, still the same actors doing the same thing. It just would have looked better, if you know what I mean. So that would have been fine. Yeah. That would have been a fine compromise. But what can you do?
Yeah, have some kind of in-universe explanation. Like maybe they were maybe Vader had a force power, or maybe Obi-Wan had a force power, where it exhausts the other or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, something. But just even if it's slower, just make it look better, like it was intentionally slow or methodical.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's the only weakness of, because I know George Lucas originally, I don't know if he wrote it for Toshiro Mifune, or if he just wanted to get him, but putting in that big fight scene and then casting Alec Guinness, who's, fairly old at this point, that's something that he just, I'm sure, couldn't do much more than what he did. But if you had in Toshiro Mifune, who is known for his samurai films, could do some really good action, we could have had a more exciting sequence there.
Well, and Obi-Wan has a hood. I mean, they could have...
That's fair. Put the hood on him.
Put a white beard on him.
Yeah, suddenly you bring in, you want a Tom Baker or John Pertwee stunt doubles, just throw them in there. We have so many Doctor Who actors here, I'm sure they could have called up some of the stunt guys. I'm pretty sure Havoc did do the action for this, by the way. They were in the Stormtroopers most of the time.
Oh dear, I haven't heard a reference to Havoc in a very long time.
So if we do compare, if I may compare the lightsaber battle at the end, at the end, to the duel that the general has with his comrade in the hidden fortress, obviously if that was what Lucas was lifting from, makes sense there. Definitely very different, and in this case it was much more set up, especially since the environment that they're in is a lot more tight. Not just tight, but I'm not going to say I felt that duel in Hidden Fortress was contrived or anything, but it definitely just seemed like, and the general goes this way, and all of a sudden, hey, he sees his former comrade. It's like, let's have a duel. So I'm not saying like, it's out of nowhere or anything like that, but this time it was kind of built up. It was very built that these two were going to fight each other. And yeah, very, very different where instead in that film, it was, out in the open, and there are obviously cuts that Kurosawa put, like, focus the camera in, then pulled back. This one, yeah, Lucas kind of restricted himself to much tighter corners. And it's weird, yeah, because Lucas is, I think, good at showing the fight scenes. He pulls the camera back like you should with a fight scene. But yeah, this one was a little wonky, and I felt, and this is even throughout the whole film, there were things that they excelled at, and then there were things that I felt like was not first take, but definitely it was the first attempt. And they're like, they're not writing it off, but it's just like, it's that rule of like, well, it's better that we released it than we didn't release it at all. So it's like, as limited as it is in this, and the epicness that it's been built up as, just treating the film as its own, I was like, yeah, it is a little bit of a letdown. I will admit that, not just like from a technical standpoint, but also it's the first time we see a lightsaber duel, and it's like, well, how do these things work? But obviously, throughout the years, we've like evolved it to be something else.
Well,
but I kind
of the fact that Lucas went back and did multi-additional edits. I mean, I would have been fine if you leave the lightsaber duel alone, but don't add any of the other shit. And one of my biggest complaints about the Star Wars movie, the first one, is that I want a original cut of the film on 4K. I don't want an updated version. I just want the movie as it was before it was called A New Hope, just Star Wars. It was a standalone film. I want that in 4K. That'd be totally fine. But I mean, since Lucas decided he wanted to mess with it over and over and over, it reminds me of Spielberg fucked up when Spielberg fucked with E.T. back in the when was that, in the 2000s?
I think it's the early 2000s.
And he even said later, and he put him back in. He's like, I shouldn't have done that because Lucas rotted your head with not ever finishing something. I'll be honest, I'm not a Lucas apologist. I think he's an idiot. I love the Star Wars films. Don't get me wrong. The only reason that film is even somewhat releasable or somewhat watchable is because of his wife, who edited the damn thing. Because everybody said it was going to be horrible. What she was given, she cut it down, and because of her ability to edit a film and cut it down to what it needed to be, I don't think this film would have been a success. If it wasn't for Marcia Lucas, I don't think this film would have been a success. Honestly, I think it would have bombed.
And George Lucas himself has said that. Yeah.
I'm not all the way with Steve with all the things that he said, and it's not just with Steve, but I know it's like a lot of this is consensus amongst especially older fans of Star Wars.
Yeah.
I definitely, of course, would like the original versions available on 4K or even Blu-ray, and I wish, they should be available, certainly. That being said, though, not just with Star Wars, but generally speaking, with special editions of other things out there, I'm just going to be honest, I tend to watch the newest special editions of Blade Runner, TOS, whatever.
But you have the original. But
Yes,
Blade
yes,
Runner,
yes.
You have the original, and you have the director's cut, and you have the special edition
Final
cut.
cut.
I mean,
yeah.
Blade Runner has like 20 cuts.
Again, I would love to have the original, and it should be out there in a premium format.
They should. But Lucas refuses.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you could say the same thing about, well, not to the same degree, but James Cameron is a little bit that way, but not as harshly as George Lucas is with hiding the original stuff. But that being said, when we just talk about Star Wars, when it comes to the alterations, there's definitely alterations in all three originals that I am 100% here for, and then there's other ones that I don't. But it's all case by case for me, so it depends. But overall,
I feel like A New Hope's the worst.
No.
Out of all the updates, no, I think Empire Strikes Back. I don't mind what they did.
Yeah, that's
there.
okay.
I don't mind what they did with Jedi, except for the end song and adding Hayden Christensen in it. But the first movie has been, in my mind, it's ruined this film. Why doesn't Lucas? I mean, I know it's Lucas, and I'm pretty sure when he sold it to Disney, he wrote it in the contract, you are not allowed to touch.
Yeah, I'm sure it's him.
Touch this movie.
100%.
While Lucas probably has a 4K copy of the original film.
He's watching and laughing.
Yeah, it's somewhere locked away, and we'll never see it until he dies. And then whoever his heirs are of this license, they'll hopefully release it then. But his refusal to do this is just mind-boggling to me. I don't understand it. Why not release it like Ridley Scott with Blade Runner? Why not have the 30 copies or 30 revisions that we can all watch and enjoy the way we want to? But no, he's got to have.
I don't know. Well, I don't like it. I'm not nearly as bothered about this, what we're talking about. And if we were just talking about what was the most screwed up by special edition, actually, I think I'm leaning towards Jedi for me.
Me too.
What do you think?
More than this one.
What scene?
The bar scene with the stupid guy who sings and we look at his dancing uvula.
Oh, yes. That was horrible. Yes.
Horrible.
I forgot. I blocked that out of my memory. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll discuss that when we get there.
That's like the worst moment. And then there's another thing I don't like in that one. But anyway, but in this one, it's not a big deal to me.
Like adding Jabba. We don't need to see Jabba the Hutt.
That's a terrible scene, by the way. When he walks over him and...
It doesn't even look right. It looks horrible.
No.
At least update that shit.
In Boba Fett, he like mugs at the camera for a second. He like looks right at us.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of cool, but I can understand that.
I don't... see, that's funny. We're like back and forth on all these different elements when you break them down. Yeah, I don't like the Jabba scene, but I also think it's a lot better now than it was in 97. There's a great fan edit out there that I just saw this week where they took the CG from the modern version, but they made it so that Jabba is being hollow projected on one of those little walkie droid things like out of Phantom Menace. No, but it works really well. It's like the best of both because Jabba still takes the same space that the human actor took up, but it still has, and the CG looks better when it's the hologram rather than, the actual figure standing there.
But do you actually like that scene itself? You think that was a needed scene?
The only reason I like it, and this is for me when I didn't know Star Wars backwards and forwards, and for other people who watch this movie and don't know Star Wars backwards and forwards, it took me a long time in my youth to work out the connection of Jabba, like in Return of the Jedi, and how the seeds were planted in A New Hope. So I do like it's a little bit more highlighted, and it gives a better connection to something that was already there before it was just in the Greedo conversation. Because that was just an element that really, really confused me for a long time when I was younger. And just a little bit more would have gone a long way for me. So I think it works. And it could have been done better than it has been done, but having something there, I think, is better than having nothing at all, if it was done in a different way than what we actually see.
Yeah, I disagree with Eric. I'm sorry.
Oh, I think the Greedo scene more than sold the conflict there.
Again, I don't think the casual viewer, adult or not, would necessarily catch that, especially when you think that there's 3 years between the sequels and it's not easy to revisit back in the day, it wasn't easy to revisit the films.
Yeah, but now you're inserting, because of course that stuff only existed when we had home video. So yeah, people seeing the theater would have been something different.
But even in modern times, though, where these things are available, people who are casual viewers aren't going to be like, okay, let me brush up on my Star Wars before I watch the sequel or whatever.
Okay, one of the most notorious edits that Lucas did is the "Who Shot First" scene.
Oh boy,
Glad I saw it, just as what it was today, and it was perfect. Continue.
What was it? That Greedo that Greedo shot first instead of Han.
Han.
No, yeah, like I saw, like as it originally was intended, where it's a brilliant scene, by the way. I just love that scene a lot, where Greedo has him, by the gunpoint, and then Han Solo just like maybe it's too easy, but just like he has him at gunpoint, and then like Han Solo just like just keep talking and gets his blaster ready, and then fires. It's like, oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah, you can see him needling Greedo on as Greedo's like, I can't wait to kill you, and then right after that he's like, oh, I bet you would, and then blasts him.
It's awesome.
That's great.
But the original film, Han shot before Greedo could.
There was never a blaster fire
Absolutely.
And I like that.
Yeah, Han was the only one that shot.
That Han is more morally gray.
Yeah. The original version is by far the best version of this scene, but there's been like 4 or so different versions.
Yes.
To date.
Oh my god. Yes. And the first one was horrible. I mean, I think that actually the second might have been worse, I think, when they had the head bob.
The 97 edit is the worst of all of that scene. But the most modern version...
But it's so obvious that they moved Harrison Ford's head like he cocked it, even though it looked solely...
Disturbing.
Totally Yes, disturbingly... Unreal.
It's bad in every possible way.
Uncanny,
yes.
The 97 version is completely horrible. But the newest current version on streaming on Disney Plus, it's definitely the next best besides the best for me. Like, it doesn't bother me anymore, even though I think the original is the best. The current edit doesn't bother me, but it's not as good as the original. The other in-between versions are bad.
Even though it changes the context of the scene, you're still fine with the change.
Yeah, that's true.
Because that's
yes.
Yeah, they're always
Again, I'd rather have the original. But there's other things I would change first if we were just looking at the newest version.
Yeah, like all the dumb jokes in Mos Eisley.
Or the Vader and Obi-Wan battle. That to me, and it's funny because when the movies were re-released in '97, I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, good, they'll fix that lightsaber scene because that does not work."
Yeah, the other thing I don't like now is, okay, I like the idea of updating the entry into Mos Eisley, but not the way it's executed. Not the way it's executed. But I definitely like showing more rather than the original version, just not what we got.
Oh, I hate it.
Yeah, I think it was totally fine in the original version. There was like maybe one dodgy effect when we see the 3 riding towards the city. It looks very strange, but otherwise I think they showed us just enough.
No, it was okay in the original, but I'm saying I'd be okay with updating it, and I think it would be a nice thing on paper to show more of a larger city coming into it. I just wouldn't have it look the way it looks in the special editions, and especially take out the stupid, quirky Jawa humor, which I think when we saw it in '97 was like a sign of things to come in the Star Wars universe.
When he's swinging off that large beast, I hate that.
I always hated that. Yes.
Yeah, and this is as good a time of any to mention this. So when I watched the 4K version, I had a friend who'd never seen Star Wars before, and they wanted to watch it too.
That's impressive.
So I watched it with them, and they didn't know anything about the CGI additions. And so I didn't mention to them just because I didn't even think to. But as they're watching it, they're like, wait a minute, like, what's this? Why is this here? This doesn't seem to fit. And I was like, oh, yeah, I should have told you. Like, yeah, they keep doing these new additions. They keep updating them every few years, adding in this CGI stuff. And they're just like, oh, it looks terrible. Like, it doesn't fit at all with the rest of this.
No, it doesn't. It's so obvious. It's so obvious that it's the grain and everything. Yeah.
As it went along, she kept being like, wow, whenever we see the old effects, they all look so quaint. Why would they insert all that stuff that doesn't seem to fit at all? And so, yeah, she was very baffled by all that.
Amen.
CG was all the rage in the late 90s,
Oof.
post Jurassic Park. But that's the thing, like the dewbacks, again, on paper, the idea of showing them more alive and in motion, I'd sign off on that.
Right.
But the way it actually looks in the special edition, no, not like that.
It looks stupid.
Yeah, what they should have done, and again, all this stuff looks better in the Disney version versus 97, but still, what they should have done for the special edition initially is done something more like Jurassic Park, where you had a mixture of practical and CG, like just a little CG, and then it could have been a lot more acceptable and welcome by me. But again, I'm not dying over that scene either. But
Yeah, I just don't know why he felt the need to insert all that stuff anyway. It's kind of like, was he like an obsessive kind of guy he just never thought it was perfect, and so he kept trying to tinker?
Yeah, I think so.
yeah, I'm sure that's part of it. Again, in the late 90s after Jurassic Park, that's when filmmakers on the cutting edge, that's the first time they believed we could do anything visually, even though that we know that's not true. But
it aged poorly.
Yeah, I think that was the prevailing sentiment in the late 90s.
Yeah, and I'm curious for you, Isaac, having started with the special editions, do you maybe have a different take? Do you feel like they're more a part of this than, people who didn't start with that stuff?
Well, again, I don't know if maybe I'm incorrect, but I feel like I did see the original version, the non-special edition version, from 96. So I know I said I probably saw that, but because when I watched them, I was like, this looks different. Maybe it was just pardon me if this is wrong. Was there a regular edition release for the VHS version, and then there was like a special edition that had like those added scenes, or is that not true?
Yeah, there was the 95 VHS set.
Maybe that was it.
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah, Lucas made his announcements like, this would be the final version that I'll be releasing in the original format.
Asterisk.
And we're working on putting together the special editions, which came out in 97.
Of course, that wasn't true, but that is how it happened
at the time, of course.
Yeah.
So
I think 2008 was the last proper. Yeah.
Well, then there was a 2011 release, but anyway. So not to.
Oh.
Well, the Blu-rays. I mean, that was I guess the first time the Blu-rays were released, or Star Wars was on Blu-ray.
Oh no! I was saying for the VHS, he was announcing this will be the last time I released the original versions.
Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah, pardon me. And then because I have they put them on DVD. I have this, full screen limited edition that I have in my hand, which was what I watched.
Yeah, 2008 set, I think.
4, I believe.
Oh, that early?
2000. Yeah, well, it was on DVD. But anyway, so to answer your question, Caleb, not to attempt in my unprofessional and non-indoctrinated opinion to diagnose Lucas, just to I guess explain things to Steve. This is not me. Don't worry. This is not an apologist or something like that. This is just me trying to observe why, like the whys. Lucas has, like me, a very low self-esteem. Very much so. Never.
How do you know?
He's confident in some things, but
I could actually see that from his interviews.
How do you know that?
Yeah, go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, the post interviews, the ones after his criticisms, I could see that with him always talking about, people hate me for Star Wars and people can never be satisfied with what I've done.
Oh, that's definitely obvious.
And talking about his pressure to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, especially saying something, as taboo as calling Disney white slavers or something like that. I think hang on. Okay, sorry. Maybe not the best example.
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
They're droids.
There is a thing. They're droids. Jeez. By this point, they may be because they're all just maybe run by AI. But I think just as a person with low self-esteem and similar to with the same with just looking at Lucas, it's like, yeah, even then he always seems to. It's almost like he's in the wrong profession in a way, but he just he seems very meek, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but he seems very meek. He seems very soft-spoken, introverted. I'm so fascinated that this was the film that he created, and like the like not to throw it out there, but like the meek shall inherit the earth. It's like, wow, he really did something that turned audiences to his attention to him, and it's like, especially being a director, like he could maybe towards his later years, especially when he did the prequels, maybe he was a little bit more like confident. I don't know if confidence is the word, but he just felt more assured potentially.
Yeah,
but
certainly.
I do wonder if there is that obsessive thing that Caleb was saying, and the whole control freak nature, as we've alluded to throughout the prequels. I definitely wonder if it is a way of an artist. It's like, what if Leonardo da Vinci looked at Mona Lisa and was like, I got to remake this. Like, time to remake this.
Well, I think he even did that in his own time, during his lifespan. True. No, I think you're right. Generally, Isaac.
So he's. It almost seems like there was trouble on the sets. There was a lot of trouble. Like everything was not as good. And I can understand this as well. In a way of just like not wanting to. If maybe it's a flaw as well, where it's like, well, I don't have control of my life, so I'm gonna instead make everything else a project, or I'm gonna instead make sure that everything else around me is in control, whereas I'm not in control. Maybe that's another way of thinking potentially, and so. If things were just not going well on set, and the production side of it, and then post production, it was while he was stressed. He hated that. Yeah, and I feel as though the special editions were a way to, I don't know if it's the word like to bring closure, or at least
like reclaim
the demons almost, and to at least conquer his demons, and to at least finally snuff out all that. I don't know if self-loathing is a word, but just all the trauma that he experienced from making these.
Well, yeah, because he didn't want to do it. When Fox wanted a sequel, he's like, I'm not directing that. It almost killed me.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's interesting.
So it's a broken person, a broken man, just trying to grasp and regain control. His life.
I'm starting to picture Anakin Skywalker now.
Yeah.
I'm starting to picture him in like an alcoholic binge, like sitting in a dark room trying to remaster this.
And then I think he got in trouble with like the Hollywood unions, actor unions, because they didn't at the beginning of the film have the actors' names in the cast.
There was that too. Yep.
I thought that was interesting because nobody else before that I'm aware of did that. I mean, he really pushed the trend on that,
which is funny because
which I like.
A lot of people, some people do that nowadays as well, where they won't open with credits of people. Nobody will have because I remember before, like, you would have melodies and whatnot. You'd open with like the score and showcase all the players and all the production staff and the crew members who worked on it. Instead, it was he was saying like, forget that Hollywood tradition. Let's try this other thing. Let's go back to, the serials. And that's where we have, just the fanfare. Then like Lucasfilm Limited, which is the best logo they have. Honestly, the simple green and black, that's perfect. Don't need the gold or anything like that. And then the Star Wars and the John Williams score and the scroll. It's like, I'm going to forget these traditions that we've done. Like, let's try this out.
Speaking of John Williams, what are your thoughts for this film? I mean,
can I please gush? I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt anybody. I need to gush because listening to this again and watching this again today, oh my goodness! Like, he allegedly, again, in the behind the scenes documentaries or whatnot, when they had an initial cut of the film, they're like, oh, it's interesting. Where's the sound? Or where's the music? Excuse me. It's like, well, we don't have one yet. So coming off of the success of Jaws, I guess Spielberg recommended John Williams to Lucas to hey, here, try this guy out because he's really good, and he is. What I love about this film is the moments where his score isn't there. That's more noticeable. And it's like, oh, we have quiet time, because nowadays, just with, I don't know if it's anything, we always have to have noise. There always has to be a stimulant in movies that's with at least a sound. And I'm like, we don't need that. I appreciate movies that don't often have to have something like a excuse me,
Very cool.
just a melody. You don't. There you go. So it's just like, I appreciate the music there. And oh man, even listening to it on its own, as like if you're just listening to an album,
absolutely.
if you're listening on a
Yeah.
record player, it works so well. I go back to this one often as well. So my goodness, I appreciate the score very much so. Steve, what are your thoughts?
No, absolutely. And I remember as a kid, like I got the record for the soundtrack, and that really started my love for soundtracks. Like later in the years, like I remember getting the Ghostbusters soundtrack, the Indiana Jones,
Oh man.
Raiders of the Lost Ark soundtrack. Like I just, most of those, I mean, obviously, not Ghostbusters, but John Williams soundtracks were just amazing. Jaws. I mean, I think he's the Mozart of our day. I think that 100 years from now, people are going to be listening to him like we think of the classics, like Beethoven or what have you. I think
interesting.
I really think.
There's no doubt.
Yeah, I think he's just a treasure, and he's retiring now. I understand after the last horrendous Indiana Jones film. But the one thing about that horrendous film, Dial of Destiny, the people loved. Everybody hated that. As far as I know, everybody hated that film except for the soundtrack. Everybody loved the soundtrack. That was a highlight of that film. I saw the movie and I agree. So I think he's just a genius. I think his name will be celebrated for hundreds of years.
And to, I guess, point out not the obvious, but people know this as well, but maybe to my co-hosts they don't. But just like how Lucas was pulling a lot of different sources and different ideas and stories, here with Thousand Faces for its sake, but everything, like a lot of other stuff to make this film. Williams as well was like working with a bunch of he like talking with Lucas, he decided he was decided, but he was going in the direction of also taking a lot of influences from different places, and some people criticize him for that in his later years, and even looking back on this and being like, "Oh, how could you done this?" And kind of ripped off some prior composers. And
who are they stating he ripped off? I haven't heard this.
Well, it's a lot of composers. I know who they are. I don't remember their names. So forgive me if I do sound unprofessional here on that.
I'll tell you in a moment the one who's like the most obvious.
I don't know if it's Stokowski, but like there's a lot of Baroque musicians that he goes back to, but in a way he was, and certain music critics will also come at this as well. So pardon me if I sounds uneducated, but it's like, yeah, he also was like, I guess the film scores of the time as well kind of got away from that orchestral sound, so he was like, let's bring back, like, if this is a love letter to those serials, let's maybe go back even further and bring in some of the operatic stuff. What the hey was either like Russian composer or somebody else.
Yeah, okay, so the most obvious work that Williams borrowed from was this symphony called The Planets.
I've heard of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
By Gustav Holst,
Yes,
who was English, and it was written originally between 1914 1917, I guess around the time of World War One. And if you listen to that, first of all, it's nice to listen to the whole thing. I mean, it's definitely a good one. But you will definitely hear certain specific motifs that are very Star Wars, that are very... The Star Wars version is very much like a sound alike. And there's one in particular, I can't remember if it's Mars or Saturn, because the different movements are named after the planets. But one of them sounds very much like the Imperial March. Like that one I remember. But there's others besides that.
But here's this. I mean, it's like in Hollywood with storytelling. Everything is a copy of something else. I mean, even...
Oh, no. Yeah, it's all good. It's all good, but you will definitely hear Star Wars if you listen to the planets. Yeah, I have no criticism of it.
But I think it's great. And I think it's worth mentioning, while we're gushing over John Williams, is the Ben Burt who did the sound effects.
Oh yeah.
Darn straight.
How many sound effects are in this film that people automatically, like the laser fire or the lightsabers or the ships like the Millennium Falcon taking off. I mean, Ben Burt did all that, and it's so iconic.
It is iconic.
And then we had the Wilhelm scream in there. I mean, that's worth mentioning as well.
Yeah, just the Vader breathing is such an iconic sound.
No, all of it is great. It all translates well in the other media and the video games. Burt's work, even all these many things he's done post Star Wars in modern films, just in general, if you listen to any movie that he's worked on, you can just tell there's like a different level of attention to detail. Yeah.
The sounds of the TIE fighters when they fly by. I mean, how
Of course.
original is that? When it screams through the...
R2-D2, Chewbacca, it just goes on forever and ever and ever. The Jawas, Sand People.
Ooh, Tiwi.
Caleb, you were wanting to say something there. What was it you were wanting to ask or state?
Oh, I was going to say one of the pieces that I didn't remember standing out so much, but definitely stood out this time, was just those early moments on Tatooine when it was just, I think mainly when it was just C-3PO wandering around. Some of that music really captured me this time and has a good way of emphasizing the alienness of the planet that they're on, I feel.
One thing I didn't realize, and I was listening to it a few months ago, well, I was re-listening to the Death Star run, or the Death Star fight, and realized that, because I listened to the complete track, and it's like, okay, it's all the way through, but I realized in the movie, they stop. Like, once it's like the trench run, like the first two trench runs,
Yes.
they pull the music out, and it's just the sound effects. Brilliant. Whoever's idea that was, like, great job with that, because it really built up the tension. And showcased like what was like just focused the audience's attention on what was like actually supposed to be happening. One thing that I maybe not as passionate as Steve is, but definitely something that irks me with the special editions is some of the sound effect changes. That's something that annoys me because my brain is like
Really?
training myself. Okay, so
I'm
like,
not familiar of this. Okay, so what sound effect changes?
this is the thing. So
You are with some of them.
so there's a few instances where I haven't watched the special editions in a while because I basically, as of I don't know when Caleb and I did the commentaries last, I refused to basically ever watch the special editions because I just prefer like the original versions anyway. I don't really need much of it, but there's ones where if I catch them on like cable TV. I'll notice like sometimes there's like the AT-ST blaster fire somewhere. I could also hear like the AT-AT fire. What else is there? And there's other ones where it's just like other ship laser fire that's in regular blaster fire. I'm like, what the hey is that about? I didn't need to see that.
But it was in A New Hope. They made changes.
I believe they did. At least as far as my memory is concerned, I'm pretty sure there were some changes with certain shots or of blaster fire are have was vehicle or ship fire instead. I'm like, oh, that I don't agree with that.
Oh.
The vast majority of the special edition noise changes don't bother me in the slightest. Most of them, I think the two that stand out the most, I think, are the Crate Dragon Scream in A New Hope, and the No in Return of the Jedi. Those are the ones that jump out at people the most. But other than that, I'm not really too bothered. And the Dragon Scream completely took me by surprise in '97. Like, what the hell is going on? I think they've softened it a little bit now and add some reverb and echo, so it's not as annoying in the current version. But yeah, other than those, I don't think too much about that stuff.
Well, speaking of the Crate Dragon, I remember in the original film seeing that skeleton along the dune scene.
Oh, love that.
Like, I'm like, what the fuck is that? Like, Star Wars had so many little tidbits that didn't really explain it. It was just so fascinating. But as an adult, I now see, okay, they were pulling from Dune, the film, the books. With the worms and then found out later spice and shit like that.
Certainly.
I think I don't see people talking about this enough. Like Flash Gordon, again, I think Lucas is a history revisionist. Yeah, we pulled from Flash Gordon, but I don't really see enough people talking about this. Has a lot in common with Dune as well.
You just got to go to the right channels. You got to go to the no. You definitely hear more about the Flash Gordon stuff, but if you go to the right channels, yeah, people talk about it plenty all the time because if people who study George Lucas as fans are well aware that originally he wanted to get the filming rights, Lucas did, for Dune because he wanted to make the first screen version, and then
Of Dune?
when he was unable to, yes. And when he was unable to, that's when he shifted to Star Wars. Likewise, Lucas also wanted to do like the first live action Lord of the Rings, and when he didn't, he did Willow. So yeah, this is well known in the George Lucas lore.
By the way, so glad he didn't get Dune. So glad he didn't get Dune.
It's probably good he didn't get either, but who knows?
Yes.
I'm looking so forward to the sequel.
Same here, Steve.
Oh, there's no doubt.
But one of the things that I wanted to make sure that we highlight, because every time I go back to this, I feel like I'm so guided by the usual Star Wars fan opinion when it comes to Luke Skywalker in this, because people always talk about, oh, Luke, he was such a whiny little brat in this one,
I never see him.
and Mark Hamill, he's a bad actor in this, and so I'm like, oh, maybe I don't remember right, maybe he is more whiny than I remembered. But then I go back and watch it, I'm like, I just don't see what people see when they say that about him here. I think he comes across pretty charming throughout, and yeah, maybe he's a smidge whiny to start, but it seems understandable. I mean, he's kind of feeling confined there, and his uncle doesn't even want to really listen to him. He's like, just push it off for the next season. Like, don't worry about it. You want to see the wider world. Well, I think it comes off mostly natural. What do you guys think about that?
Steve, let's go with you first. What do you think of Caleb's question?
Oh no, I disagree with that. I mean, Luke is whiny, but that's the character in my mind. I don't think it's because that's how Mark Hamill played the character. I think he's young and he's impatient. He wants to go to Tashi Station to pick up some power converters. He doesn't want to fucking work on the farm. I mean, can you blame him?
Yeah, who would? Out in the middle of nowhere.
Eric, what is your response to Caleb's question?
I think there's two prevailing fan camps out there. The one that Caleb mentioned and the one that Caleb and Steve are speaking from, which is, there's nothing wrong with either camp in my opinion. I'm somewhere in between, leaning towards Caleb and Steve, because it's neither here nor there, never has been for me personally. But I think, like Caleb and Steve, it's because I've grown up and lived with this series my whole entire time. One of the reasons I love watching first-time reactions in modern times is because I'm literally seeing adults of different ages literally watching Star Wars for their first time. And I don't think they're crazy with their modern eyes noticing how whiny Luke is. And I think it's because they didn't grow up with it. And I think all these different points are valid from the different camps. But yeah, I'm somewhere in between. Because I personally didn't notice how whiny he was until recently with these first time reactions. And when these people were saying it in the moment, oh my God, like, why is Luke getting in the way? Why is Luke bothering Han when he's trying to go to hyperspeed? They were valid criticisms for these people watching these movies for the first time as an adult. So yeah, it makes sense to me. I would say it's among some other things that first time watchers in modern times always notice. They always notice that that scene or those scenes. They always notice that C-3PO is a crazy pessimist.
Yes, hugely.
Especially in this movie in particular.
But that's so great. I love that.
Yep.
I love that too.
No. I'm not saying it. I'm just saying what sticks out to modern audiences. They notice every time Han Solo gives a line or quip that is very not PC in modern times, and especially when he talks about I can't remember how he says it, but
Your Highnessness.
Yeah, but he also says something about we don't need to listen to a woman, or I can't remember how he says it after the trash compactor scene. They always notice that. And they also notice that Vader at times has these weird, awkward physical moments, like these weird times when he just turns around suddenly.
Oh
or,
yeah,
like,
yeah. At the
yeah.
very beginning, yeah, he turns around to face one of the generals or moths or whatever you call them. He's like literally inches away.
Yes,
like,
that one
that's
always
awkward.
cracked me up. But there's like those are the things I notice that first time watchers always notice, and like kind of pops out at them. But yeah, I get it though.
Eric's always here to give us the perspective of the first time reactor channels. I don't get those channels.
Well, that's why again I like watching that stuff because you're vicariously seeing it through fresh eyes, especially modern eyes where everything's different now culturally.
I respect it.
I think that can be a little unfair because it's like asking somebody today to watch Gone with the Wind.
No, you're absolutely right. It is unfair, but I like to see that perspective because I could never know that because I grew up with it.
I see both sides. Makes sense.
And to give us their opinion while they're watching it and talking to an audience and trying to
because they'll point things out,
half engaging with the movie.
Yeah, they'll point things out, and I'm like, oh, I never thought of that because it's just always been that way in my head.
Now, sometimes we need an unbiased viewpoint to see if something is correct or not.
Yeah, I love it. I really love it. Just so you know how other people are taking it in, like outside of your own vision.
Yeah, I think I just must have a bias against that form of media, the reaction media. I just find it very, without substance, but that's just me.
I love it to death because even before this genre of YouTube existed and before YouTube existed, I have always delighted in sitting in the room with a friend and have them watch something that I love. I have always loved that since VHS has existed. So, yeah.
Yeah, but at least in that case, they're actually watching it embrace. They're not trying to be entertaining, talking to an audience the whole time. That's the part that feels disingenuous to me.
No, you're right, and yeah, that's a certain handicap, for sure. But I mean, otherwise, how else can we do this? I mean, virtually.
That's fair. I did want to highlight as another because there's the movie. It does feel like it has a bit of a strange pace at times, but they do a good job speckling through really memorable scenes that you kind of forget the slow moments in between. And one of the ones that I think always super stood out for me is the trash compactor scene. And the scary little one-eyed guy in there, and a lot of the humor there.
Yeah.
I feel like the characters all bounced off each other well, especially with the new dynamic of Princess Leia. That was always a really memorable part of the movie for me as a kid.
One of my favorite scenes as a kid of many from this movie, and also when I was kindergarten, first grade age, in British school, we had to write in journals, like mandatory, like every day, and in those journals you could like also make up like little short stories or whatever of your own. And that is one of my first memories of one of the first things I ever wrote and illustrated in my entire life, which was I wrote the story of Star Wars and I focused on the trash compactor scene, and I did a full page drawing in my journal of Han Solo shooting his blaster and it bouncing off all the walls. So yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one.
That's a great scene.
Yeah, taken from I believe not prior, but it was probably taken from old serials, I believe. Well, I think that's kind of obvious.
Oh, that makes sense. A cliffhanger moment.
Or at least just hanging on the seat of your pants. Unfortunately, it doesn't have that same like cliffhanger approach as it would in a television series. But we're talking about a movie here, not a TV.
Yeah.
So
honestly, I think that serialized nature that Lucas was drawing upon, that had to largely affect how much I was engaged in this movie from a very young age. Because to this day, it's something I still notice and still appreciate. Even though it does have the slow moments, as you say, I love how then there's just something else. It's like you're almost like going into another chapter. I mean, The Hobbit's kind of this way. I mean, when you read it or whatever. And I always like
Very
that.
episodic.
Yeah, and that's why I said I always liked starting at the Death Star and then watching the rest of the movie. And you guys talked about like multiple endings earlier, and I was gonna say, I always loved that. I actually loved the multiple endings, so to speak, as a kid, and I always loved how, this thing just happened, but now there's another thing. Oh my god, and another thing, and oh god, that was such a good part of this movie that I felt as a kid, and I still feel as an adult watching it for the 1000th time.
Yeah, one of the things that stood out for me with the trash compactor scene and a number of scenes in this, there was always little spots where there was a touch of creepiness seeping in, like the little one-eyed
Mhm.
beastie there. And earlier in the movie, when they're on the sandcrawler, you see all those strange little robots. I thought some of those as a kid were kind of creepy as well, and I definitely
Oh yeah.
appreciated that.
Oh yeah, the clown looking one always freaked me out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I had the metal scene written down. Metals scene. I feel like I'm saying metal, but I don't know if you guys, if Isaac, you had something that you wanted to go before we get there.
Now let's go with that one first, because, well, what don't you like about it?
I was gonna say, what's the deal with the metal scene? I don't know why it's being so built up.
Well, I just figured it'd be a good thing to end on for our kind of final
Oh.
topic since it's right at the end of the movie. That's why I didn't know if you guys wanted to wait.
Well, I was gonna finally answer Steve's question about Luke Skywalker from way back because nobody
Oh, man.
had asked
Yeah.
me
Go
that.
ahead.
But I like how, coming back to this, I love how Luke is the eyes of the audience's eyes, where he's supposed to be he's not just naivety one, like the naive kid or farmer guy, but I guess he's our window into this world of he's the regular person who longs for adventure, and desires, more than what he has currently on his plate. And so I like how, while there is that whininess approach, I feel like it's contrary nature and just like, the universe is against me. And then here's these, colorful cast of characters who aren't that. So Luke's kind of the straight man to everybody else, where they're all eccentrics. We get introduced to 3PO and R2, and they're like two eccentrics and are just like jabbing at each other at any opportunity. Han Solo is just like the more realistic approach guy, where he he lives in the real world. He has to deal with the fact that he's got debt and people are coming after his head, and so he'll shoot just a guy, well, pointing a gun at him, obviously. He's got Chewbacca there with him, who's his co-pilot, and also has the ability to just lop off people's limbs from their body. We have Ben Kenobi, who is this wise mentor character who apparently, it turns out, without Luke realizing, there's a connection that he has with him again, and that he knew his father, which was interesting. That his father was a Jedi Knight, and that Luke has more importance. I guess a more important history in his not past, but he's part of a legacy of something, which is cool. So yeah, he's just like, as Luke is just maybe he's normal, regular, like what is it, white milk toast or whatever you want to call it. It's like, I think that's intentional. I think that's what they're going for, because it is, well, as Lucas was using an influence the Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces. So coming back to this, I really appreciate Luke a lot more, and even in this film, and to see where he goes from here. Obviously, that's something else, but definitely there is a character arc of starting off as a farm boy with piloting skills at that, to being the one to blow up the entire Death Star at the end.
Yay. I think it's important when talking about this film, kind of the effect it had on culture.
Zeitgeist.
Yeah. I think this film has affected everybody on this panel. Looking forward, I mean, Eric talked about Marvel films. This film has affected lives and, I mean, merchandise. I mean, just look at, there would not be action figures. I mean, there would be, but it would not have progressed to the level, collectibles and things like that. I don't think that would have existed without Star Wars. I think it's just an incredible thing that this zeitgeist, as you said, has affected all of us. It affected, things that brought us together for this podcast. Could you imagine if there's been no effect on collectibles, Doctor Who, or what have you? Yes, I'm drunk now. Not as drunk as Sean, because Sean has passed out. But I think it's just incredible, this film. I mean, yes, I think with modern eyes, when we watch people on YouTube watching it for the first time, yeah, I mean, it's different. But without this initial film, I mean, it's incredible. I mean, I think this film was a spark in the kindling of fandom, if you will.
Yeah, maybe moving it outside of the kind of obscure corners, people like meeting in little like Star Trek clubs, their local clubs. This is something kind of bigger.
Well, yeah, and you even notice with the first timers, even though they don't know anything about the story and don't know the names of many characters, once certain things flash on the screen, and they go, "Oh, yeah, oh, so that's a Yoda saying," or that thing I've always heard. Oh, that's what it is. And so like they still know like so much, even though they literally never watched Star Wars in their life. And so, I mean, that speaks to the power of what you're talking about, of how much it influences everything.
But yeah, from this film from 1977, I mean, this was the catalyst.
Yeah, and they'll always be like, "Oh, this is like that thing that happened in John Wick. Oh, this is like in Fast and Furious. I didn't know that came from Star Wars first." Like, it just goes on forever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I guess we'll highlight before we move on to the getting around to the end. We haven't talked too much about the iconic cantina scene, and I don't know if there's much to say, but I did always appreciate the variants of aliens there, just as a way of showing us that, well, this is a much wider universe than we realized. Because I think up to that point in the movie, at least in the theatrical version, we'd only really seen the Jawas and that skeleton of the big alien.
And the Sand People, yeah.
Oh yeah, the Sand People, yes, I forgot about them. But seeing all the various different ones in there, and even though some of them do just look like kind of cheap masks that they threw onto someone, it's still just such an exciting scene for expanding out. Like, oh, there's this universe is so much bigger in this small little desert.
I disagree with you on that. I think the at the time for the special effects with the masks and stuff, I thought it looked great. I mean, even on a revisit.
Yeah, there's only a couple, and I think they cut out some of them for the
yeah, I think so too.
The Blu-ray one, because some of them in the background do look just kind of funny. But in the Devil Guy,
Yeah, there's a few that just.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Just the what is it? There's some just guys wearing like astronaut helmets.
Yeah, I always like that too. They can't breathe the air, Mos Eisley, or Tatooine. But yeah, well, I guess just for the metal scene that I keep highlighting.
Actually, wait, sorry, Caleb. I had one thing to. Actually, to add to the cantina scene, the obvious technical answer of like, yeah, we really hadn't seen any aliens other than like the Sand People. What like how come we didn't see it? The obvious answer is they filmed in Tunisia. No like sane human being is gonna wear all that prosthetics or all those masks in probably 50 degrees Celsius. So it's like they're not gonna do that. So
Yeah,
that's why they instead were on a set where hopefully it was climate controlled and nobody would pass out from having to wear all those masks and bodysuits.
And you had B. Arthur in the back. With the,
of course, who can't forget her and all that stuff.
I was gonna say they couldn't hire any sane people to do it, so that's why they got Anthony Daniels in there to wear the robot costume.
Oh, speaking of
No.
okay, so you want to talk about Steve, you want to talk about special editions as well. This was one that always like kind of made me go, huh? Things that made me go, Which is so we have
things that make you go,
Sorry. Oh dear.
Exactly. Glad you got that reference. But I have to. It was interesting when I was a kid. I was like, oh man, there's blood in this film. After Obi-Wan lops a guy's hand off, or arm off, excuse me, and there's that of like, couldn't he have de-escalated? No. After throwing Luke, threw Luke across the room, obviously that makes sense. But I was surprised that there's blood. But obviously, again, this is like the first time we didn't know that lightsabers, could cauterize wounds. So it's like there's a special edition, not muck up, but there's another thing to add to the special edition list of like,
right?
Wait, especially with Lucas, wanting to, I guess especially with like Han Solo, not having Han Solo be like a dirty rotten scoundrel for shooting first. It's weird how he changed the fact that didn't change that there's blood on the floor. Like, what's up with that?
I guess that is a bit weird.
I thought he would have wanted to that be removed.
Of all the things, yeah, there's like certain things like, why didn't he fix that instead of adding Jabba or Jabba? Yeah,
That's a good point.
that's why I would love to have just original cut. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I will not die happy until we get an original.
It's funny though. I'm actually arguing for the special edition of like, well, how come he didn't do that?
I was gonna say
in that thing.
this is something that has never crossed my mind and still doesn't cross my mind.
It doesn't feel out of place to you now, even when it's brought to you.
No, not at all. This is just for me personally. This is zero burger every which way.
Like, I don't care that there's blood on there. I'm used to it because every kid gets bloodied at some point in their life and they realize they got blood on them. But it's like out of everywhere. It's like there's at least going further in. There's a continuity error with like lightsabers cauterizing wounds.
No, hearing what you're saying, I actually, just speaking for myself, would rather this particular thing just stay as is.
Oh yeah, I'm okay.
I
with
wouldn't
it.
feel better.
Oh, of course, all of it should.
No. But I mean, I wouldn't feel better if they took the blood out. It's neither here nor there because all I need to do is simply do a little head retcon, and this species' blood doesn't work. The way human blood works.
There is a retcon for
No,
it.
but I'm not saying I don't even have to do that because it's not even an issue for me in the first place.
But there is a retcon.
No, this is just triggering my Doctor Who remembrance of the mostly Harmless Cutaway back in the day, and the headcanon always coming in to clean up Stephen Moffat mistakes. But
Oh yeah, but I understand. But at the same time, I don't even need to do that because I'm fine with it.
we'll keep going, Steve.
No, someone explained it away that Ponda Boba, I think his name is. I can't remember.
Ponda Baba, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, he had more of a certain biological function that would allow for. I mean, there's sci-fi. I mean, you could.
Yeah, maybe it's not
extend
even
it away.
blood. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's an alien defense
Maybe it's
mechanism.
cum. I mean, we don't know.
I was thinking squid ink, but sure.
Maybe he was hiding some spice in his sleeve, and when it got heated up, it all turned to liquid.
Maybe we don't know. It's sci-fi.
Yeah.
Possible spice.
No, but
Actually, this time around, when we were in the cantina scene and they were playing jizz, I was actually thinking to myself, okay, what
Playing
instruments
what?
was John?
is that what they call
We've
it?
been over this. Don't
Yes, we've been
don't-
over it.
No, but is
don't-
that
don't
is
even
that
tell me.
is that the official Star Wars name for that?
Yes, we've been
The
over
official,
this.
yeah.
Good grief!
They don't
Anyway,
remember. They don't remember.
What's it called? Say it again, please.
JIZZ. All right,
Come music.
there we go. But when this is a quick search, but I'm like, I do.
Let me Google this real quick. What is jizz?
Don't type in what is jizz. By the way, just type it in with stuff.
Save search off. No, but in all seriousness, like when he was when I was listening.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'd be straight here, guys. No, that's fine. Yeah, but when they were playing the music, I was trying to. This is a quick Google search, obviously, but I was wondering, like, and just finding sheet music. But I was wondering what instruments they were using in that because it's really like bobbity and.
Do you mean for the recording, or you mean in the movie?
Oh no, just in like recording behind the scenes. Sorry, not in the
Oh,
movie.
okay,
Mhm.
okay.
Out of movie, like what instruments Williams is using. Excuse me, but I'm pretty sure it's well documented. So.
Oh my god.
Oh, and I'll say I was missing B. Arthur singing over that little piece of music there for us.
We'll watch the holiday special if you want
God,
to.
I would love to play jizz over B. Arthur. I mean,
Oh no! Okay.
I love this. I love that. I mean, looking at what I googled, I love this. Jizz was
you Google jizz on B. Arthur.
Jizz was a genre of music. Jizz wailers were musicians who specialized in the genre.
Oh, George.
I love this. Jizz was first mentioned in canon in Star Wars Return of the Jedi Junior novelization.
Wow.
Wow.
Put in the kids' book. There you go. It's just
Ah.
it was the Disney people working that early in Star Wars.
It was definitely Disney.
Actually, speaking of that, I gotta ask: did any of you guys read the novelization to this
No.
by Alan Dean Foster?
No.
I did when I was in grade 12.
I did when I was like in 9th grade or something.
Nice.
Because I was looking for more clues about the Clone Wars, and there's a little bit more clues in the original novelization because they drew from one of the earlier scripts. So there was like little bits of extra information you didn't.
Well, yeah, it's a novel. You can add that stuff, which is fine. I just was wondering. So, I read it in grade 12. I want to reread it because it's been a while since I have read it. So, but yeah, I guess I'd recommend it. So, it's just that.
I love this. Alden Enric, the one who played Solo in Solo, he mentioned that he read articles on Wikipedia, like when he was studying for the role, taking note of jizz. Oh dear, I'm sorry. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, it's just kooky.
That's one way to describe it. I found the instruments for you if you'd like to know.
Oh, please, yeah. I know there's a clarinet in there somewhere.
You are correct. There's also trumpet, saxophones, Fender Rhodes piano, Caribbean steel drum.
Oh, that makes sense. Yep, no, I can hear it now. That's how they did it. Okay, that makes sense.
Another drum, an ARP synthesizer for the bass, and various other percussion. That's all cool. I just wish there was like a bassoon or oboe in there, because one of the instruments kind of looks like a space bassoon. But
it does actually. You're right, but
oh yeah, I always thought that since I was in band. But yeah. Anyway, so Isaac, do you have more to say about the novelization?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Just go read it.
I was like, do we want to do like final thoughts?
Yes, getting very close. I just want to mention about the metal scene. Did you guys feel like when you were a kid that was kind of corny? Because it always kind of stood out to me that they ended on that. I was like, it's nice that they celebrate their heroism, but it always stood out a little bit oddly to me.
It never came off as corny to me, but the one thing that definitely bothered me, and they kind of, I guess, brought it up in the sequel films, was that Chewbacca never got an award.
Yeah, yes.
Like that always bothered me, and it was not like a major thing. I think even MTV did a thing in the 90s where they gave Chewbacca an award, but in the sequel trilogy they finally gave him one. Hard. Okay, what was that? But outside of that, I thought it was great. The music, the build up, that was great. I just wish Chewbacca would have gotten. I mean, why didn't he get an award? I don't know why. Especially when we were talking about like slave labor at the beginning of the film with the droids. Like, he deserves his fucking award. So that was my only issue.
I never thought it was weird. I always generally liked it as a kid. I always thought it was cool. I liked seeing all the human characters like in their new smart dress, like Solo, and obviously Luke had the jacket. It's possibly when I personally have thought Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher, has looked the hottest in Star Wars, and yeah, even more than Return of the Jedi. Always thought it was cool.
What?
Always loved it. I didn't know anything about the Chewbacca medal situation until we got into the Disney era. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, I had no idea until I
Oh, wow.
started to read people talking about that. So that was never a thing. The only issue I ever had with that scene in particular was, I largely grew up on the full screen editions of this movie for a very long time. And I didn't get the widescreen VHS until approximately the year 97. And the thing that jumped out at me when I finally got to watch it in widescreen again, besides seeing additional creatures in the cantina scene, the mats of people in the audience or standing on the sides during the throne room scene or the metal scene look incredibly bad in the original version. So yeah, once I got the widescreen, I was like, oh, they gotta do something about that. I mean, this is before the special editions were coming out around the same time, but I was just, that looked bad. If anything looked bad in the original cut, that looked bad. So, but other than that, I always liked the scene. Still do.
I noticed what you were talking about there, Eric, when I was watching it today, where, I saw, like, as they were going down the steps, and then we see, like, some, I guess, troops on the side. I noticed that there was, like, they're either painted in or something else.
Yeah, they're painted in mats, probably on glass.
So, well, here's my thing. So there's obviously the Chewbacca thing of, like, how come he didn't get a medal? What about Wedge? I was thinking, like, wait a second, Wedge survived this whole thing. How come he didn't get a medal?
Yeah.
I agree, but I get it. I get why he wasn't. I mean, if this is a real thing that actually happened, like when we're watching historical documents, then yeah, Wedge should have been up there on the stage. But for in terms of the movie and the audience, it totally makes sense that he's not. Um, I was you made me think of something else weird. Like at some point, we do see Biggs die in the the Death Star run, right?
Yep. Oh, he's the last to die, I think, other than like the TIE Fighter Trooper.
Because even though I've seen this movie a million times and I just watched it twice in the last 24 hours, to this day, I can't see the moment in my head of when he actually dies, even though I know it's there and it has to be there. So that's a weird thing that I've watched this a million times, but I don't have that ingrained in my memory. And aside from liking what they did with the Throne Award medal scene, as far as updating it, I also want to mention the other special edition upgrade that I am 100% in favor of, which I think is bigger than that, is just what they did with the dogfighting for the Death Star run. That has been the best improvement in this film, and I think it's a definite improvement. And I haven't watched the original version in quite some time myself, but I know it would bother me, that scene, or those scenes in particular, the dogfighting, if I was to go back to the original.
It still looks okay. I think it still looks solid.
I think it would look okay, but I much prefer the special edition.
Well, it's Caleb on that side. But with the metal scene itself, it's, again, I think a callback to the serials of the 30s and 40s of just like, you know, going back to like to them. It's like it's the end. Our heroes have stood victorious and now they get medals. But again, I feel like everybody should get medals unless they already have. Like, you know, how come nobody in the like the rest of the troops didn't, like, because this is a like joint effort. All of a sudden, like, you know, these, unless this is like, hear me out, unless this was an initiation where, like, because of their bravery and stuff like that, they're now like part of the Rebel Alliance. Maybe that's not, you know, maybe it's out of nowhere, but like, yeah, that's one way of maybe seeing it, because out of nowhere it's like, how come nobody else got medals, as you were saying?
Because they all died. I mean,
Yeah, that's also true.
I mean, look, everybody died in that battle. I mean, except for Wedge and
yeah,
a few others.
He's in the hospital right now.
That's definitely true. Yep, that's what it is. He's in a back to tank. But you guys focusing on Chewbacca not getting his medal, I've brought this up before, but you're just making me think about when I quote unquote graduated from elementary school in 5th grade.
Okay,
And
Eric. Where's this going?
All the 5th graders, we were all there in the auditorium /
Eric, are you saying you were very hairy?
We were. That's it.
And 7'3".
We were all there in the school auditorium / cafeteria, all the 5th graders, and they called out everyone's name to go up and get your certificate and everything. And my name was the only name not called because my teacher forgot to make a certificate for me, so that's why they never called my name, and I never went up to this. And sitting in my seat, I almost thought it was because I had failed elementary school or failed 5th grade.
Oh no!
So and you guys keep talking about Chewbacca. I'm like, oh, now I feel a little Chewbacca myself.
Jeez, we triggered Eric.
Now I'm picturing a giant Chewbacca sitting in a little tiny child's seat.
Well, Eric, tonight I present to you, Eric, your medal.
Oh,
There you go.
Speech.
Thank you, Mas Kanata. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And speaking of speeches, let's move on to our final thoughts for this feature film,
All right.
Star Wars.
all right, starting with Sean.
Steve, you instead. What's your final thoughts on this film, Star Wars?
I think it's a great film if it's a standalone. I think as the building block of the rest of the Star Wars universe, I think it doesn't make sense. But nonetheless, I love it. I think it's great. I'm very happy And like I said, I watched it over and over as a kid back in '77, and it has encouraged me to buy mostly pointless shit that doesn't mean anything. I've made friends. It made me interested in other things that were sci-fi. So overall, how it affected me as a person, I think it's amazing. 10 out of 10.
If it's, how could it have improved? Is there any places in the story it could have improved in, or is it all right as its own story?
Again, if it's a standalone thing, I think it's great. If George Lucas, who continually emphatically says it was part of a trilogy, pre-planned, blah blah blah, I think it fails in that regard. But as a standalone, I think it's a great film.
All right. Thank you, sir. Eric, your final thoughts on this for this recording of Star Wars 1977.
Yeah, like I said, it's jumped around throughout my lifetime of where I place it in my overall Star Wars ranking. But at present time, it's definitely much closer to the very top. Not the very top, but very close up there. If I were to rate it, it's a perfect score, despite it not being a quote-unquote perfect movie. And even though there are things that could have been better or done a little bit differently, doesn't matter to me. Really doesn't. Those types of things as it pertains to this movie. It's perfectly fine. I'd be fine with it as a standalone. I'm fine with it in the trilogy. I'm fine with it in the overall everything. It's just great. And for me anyway, when I got to the end of Revenge of the Sith the first time, it just made me feel so much more for this particular movie that I literally had to go home immediately and watch A New Hope after Revenge of the Sith. And when Rogue One came around, that same feeling, but multiplied. So those two movies have actually made me enjoy this movie even more in retrospect. And so, yeah, I don't know what else to say.
How
I don't know.
sorry, yeah. How exactly, even though it was, nominated for Best Picture, I believe, in the 78, I believe. Is that correct?
Which I did not realize until today.
It had, 10 nominations at the Oscars, and it took home 7, I recall.
Yeah.
Rightly so, with some of the, post-production stuff, like I think Best Sound, Best Editing as well. I don't know if Best Score. I feel like it should have won Best Score. I don't remember if it did or not, but and I think Alec Guinness was up for Best Supporting Actor as well. So this thing actually got an award. I'm just wondering how could it have achieved Criterion status? How could it have been looked at alongside not equivalent of course, but how could it have gotten Stanley Kubrick's seal of approval?
Well, I think it probably does now after the fact.
Okay.
After the fact. But
Okay.
this often happens when something is so groundbreaking in film that even though some recognize it right out the gate, it usually takes time for that to really settle in. And I think it's crazy because, again, I didn't even really realize until today that it was nominated for Best Picture. And it lost out to Annie Hall, a movie that Caleb loved when we talked about it. And it makes sense to me in its time that Annie Hall would win, but I definitely don't think that's how things would play out if we had a do-over today.
What else? Do you know what other things were up for the Best Picture in that year? Excuse me.
I did, but I can find out.
Okay, I'm just wondering. I'm just trying to legitimize and say was this whole film a complete fluke, or does it have legitimacy even nowadays? That's my question.
Well, I definitely think it gets all the accolades nowadays in people's minds, but it's going to take me a second.
Yeah, Isaac, he's always He's always trying to stretch these things as long as he can. I don't get it.
Well, that, and I admit, I apologize. I'm not trying to stretch it out. I'm trying to also like get to the bottom of this.
No, oh god, I'm sorry. It's gonna take me a second.
I swear, Caleb, I'm not trying to keep this going on for much longer. I'm just like, all of a sudden now I have the opportunity to. Anyway, but other than that, I guess like so put a pin in that. Eric, I'll come back to
have it in
after
5 seconds. Okay.
Okay.
It was Annie Hall, The Goodbye Girl, Julia, Star Wars, and The Turning Point. And I couldn't tell you anything about any of those movies except for Annie Hall and Star Wars.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, sir, for your conclusion there. Caleb, your final thoughts for this recording of Star Wars 1977.
Still just as iconic as ever. Yeah, I just enjoy going back to it. It's not one that I ever pull out. I maybe pull it out like every 5-6 years. And I definitely enjoy it. It's like seeing an old friend. But then I'm happy to put it back on the shelf and not return again for, that same amount of time. I get much more out of The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, even though Jedi is a weaker film. I just feel like there's a little bit more there for me to sink my teeth in. This is just kind of a fun adventure story. And, it's a classic for a reason, but not one of my favorite classics, if that makes sense.
That's fair. I see your point now. I was like, oh, I think I see what Caleb means by like, if this is like the first attempt, I could see why he likes Empire a lot more, because it certainly goes further with these characters, which, you're definitely right. Yeah, do you think like, is this film still stand up to its, like, is it still relevant, or is it like, stand the test of time, or just as its own, or has all the merchandise kind of overbloated it and it's actually like a terrible film?
Oh God, no. No, not at all. But what I will say is I think the legacy of Star Wars more belongs to Empire and Return of the Jedi than this movie. I think those two being, especially Empire Strikes Back, being as great as it was, I think is what fully cemented the legacy of the original trilogy. If this was just what it was, it would be looked back as kind of a quaint, fun sci-fi adventure movie. I don't think it would stand on its own as well if it didn't have that great follow-up.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. Thinking about what Steve had said earlier. If Star Wars was a standalone, that would have been fine. But then you can't subtract Empire, because Empire just, what Caleb just said. Yeah, I agree with that.
But how about you, Isaac? How what's your final summations for this feature here?
Thank you, sir. Good grief. I enjoy this movie a lot. I enjoy the performances from everybody. I like the characters. I wish there was more interactions with the characters. I like that there were some moments where they had time to breathe, but this movie felt like Lightspeed to me when I came back to it. Hence why I limit myself to certain watches of it over several years, because I just feel like it's a fine wine. This thing is aged like wine. Even the effects, some of the effects definitely look of the day. I appreciate them. I appreciate how quaint they are, and there was a lot of time and energy put into all the effects. And the ending as well. I appreciate this film as well, coming back to it after watching and doing our little road to Star Wars retrospective with those two of Lucas's prior films. It is maybe like I think this is like the end of his trilogy. This is the end of Lucas's trilogy with if we start at THX 1138 to American Graffiti, then to this is the culmination of both those films. Not as much characterization as we got in American Graffiti, but definitely, again, Lucas's I guess interest in technology and not just like with cameras, but just like with technology itself, what he does with that in THX. And then at the end we have like a race in a way, but it's not a race. It's a race to blow up the Death Star. We didn't talk about the whole exhaust ports trench run scene, but honestly I think it works really well. And even within the movie's logic, there's no like, oh, how come the Empire didn't realize this? It's like because there was 2 times. There's 2 attempts. There's 2 setups as to like, we had the bombers go in and they were shot down by Vader. Then when they were right there, when they actually got to it, even the computer itself could not like, get the things in there. So obviously it was set up perfectly throughout the whole film that it was the force that was going to need to be used to get it in there. So it's like, I think there's like no retcons or there's no like plot holes there. That's just me personally, but no, just in the end, just with like the big Death Star battle, I love how it is just like a extension of like George's passion when it came to racing cars. It was just that further on. It was the ending of THX with him like in the speed, and THX himself just in like the cruiser or whatnot. That was a lot of fun seeing the evolution of that. Yeah, what more could I say? Just I do wish that. I hope that this film is legitimized and not seen as some schlocky B movie and actually has some meat to it.
Yeah, and I think its legacy is proven to be quite strong. And yeah, there's definitely more substance than like a schlocky, like maybe one of the knockoffs, like I mentioned, Star Crash or something like that. But we should probably round it down now. It's getting pretty long in the tooth, this one. So Isaac, I thank you again for joining me, and Eric, Steve, and Sean over there. I thank you guys for once again coming back for this series, and Isaac, bring us home. Bring us home.
Well, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, those in between and affiliated, for listening to us. And till next time, peace.